Book 6, Canto 5 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund SPENSER. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 5. The salvage serves Serena well, till she Prince Arthur find, who her, together with his squire, with the hermit, leaves behind. Oh, what an easy thing is to descry the gentle blood, however it be wrapped in sad misfortune's foul deformity, and wretched sorrows which have often happed. For howsoever it may grow misshaped, like this wild man, being undisciplined, that to all virtue it may seem unapt, yet will it show some sparks of gentle mind, and at the last break forth in his own proper kind. That plainly may in this wild man be read, who, though he were still in this desert wood, mongst salvage beasts, both rudely born and bred, ne ever saw fair guise, ne learned good, yet showed some token of his gentle blood by gentle usage of that wretched dame. For certes he was born of noble blood, however by hard hap he hither came, as ye may know when time shall be to tell the same. Who, when as now long time he lacked had the good Sir Calipene, that far was strayed, did wex exceeding sorrowful and sad, as he of some misfortune were afraid, and leaving there this lady all dismayed, went forth straightway unto the forest wide, to seek if he perchance asleep were laid, or whatso else were unto him betide. He sought him far and near, yet him nowhere he spied. Though back returning to that sorry dame, he showed semblant of exceeding moan, by speaking signs, as he them best could frame, now wringing both his wretched hands in one, now beating his hard head upon a stone, that ruth it was to see him so lament. By which she well perceiving what was done, gan tear her hair, and all her garments rent, and beat her breast, and piteously herself torment. Upon the ground herself she fiercely threw, regardless of her wounds yet bleeding rife, that with their blood did all the floor imbrue, as if her breast, now launched with murderous knife, would straight dislodge the wretched weary life. There she long groveling and deep groaning lay, as if her vital powers were at strife with stronger death, and feared their decay. Such were this lady's pangs and dolorous assay. Whom when the salvage saw so sore distressed, he reared her up from the bloody ground, and sought by all the means that he could best her to recure out of that stony swound, and staunch the bleeding of her dreary wound. Yet nold she be recomforted for naught, ne cease her sorrow and impatient stound, but day and night did vex her careful thought, and ever more and more her own affliction wrought. At length, when as no hope of his return she saw now left, she cast to leave the place and wend abroad, though feeble and forlorn, to seek some comfort in that sorry case. His steed, now strong through rest so long a space, well as she could she got and did bedight, and being thereon mounted, forth did pace withouten guide, her to conduct aright, or guard her to defend from bold oppressor's might. Whom when her host saw ready to depart, he would not suffer her alone to fare, but gan himself address to take her part. Those warlike arms which Calipene whileare had left behind, he gan eftsoons prepare, and put them all about himself unfit, his shield, his helmet, and his currets bear, but without sword upon his thigh to sit. Sir Calipene himself away had hidden it. So forth they travelled, an uneven pair, that mote to all men seem an uncouth sight, a salvage man matched with a lady fair, that rather seemed the conquest of his might, gotten by spoil, than purchased aright. But he did her attend most carefully, and faithfully did serve both day and night, withouten thought of shame or villainy, ne ever showed sign of foul disloyalty. Upon a day, as on their way they went, it chanced some furniture about her steed to be disordered by some accident, which to redress she did the assistance need of this her groom, which he by signs did read, and straight his cumbrous arms aside did lay upon the ground, withouten doubt or dread, and in his homely wise began to say to mend what was amiss, and put in right array. About which, whilst he was busied thus hard, lo, where a knight, together with his squire, all armed to point, came riding thitherward, which seemed by their portents and attire to be two errant knights, that did inquire after adventures, where they mote them get. Those were, to weet, if that ye it require, Prince Arthur and young Timaeus, which met by strange occasion that here needs forth beset. After that Timaeus had again recured the favour of belle Phoebe, as ye heard, and of her grace did stand again assured, to happy bliss he was full high upreared, neither of envy nor of change afeared, though many foes did him malign therefore, and with unjust detraction him did beard. Yet he himself so well and wisely bore, that in her sovereign liking he dwelt evermore. But of them all which did his ruin seek, three mighty enemies did him most despite, three mighty ones and cruel-minded eke, that him not only sought by open might to overthrow, but to supplant by sleight. The first of them by name was called Despetto, exceeding all the rest in power and height. The second, not so strong, but wise, Decetto. The third, nor strong nor wise, but spitefulest, Defetto. Oft times their sundry powers they did employ, and several deceits, but all in vain. For neither they by force could him destroy, ne yet entrap in treason's subtle train. Therefore, conspiring all together plain, they did their counsels now in one compound, where singled forces fail, conjoined may gain. The blatant beast the fittest means they found to work his utter shame, and throughly him confound. Upon a day, as they the time did wait, when he did range the wood for salvage game, they sent that blatant beast to be a bait, to draw him from his dear beloved dame unwares into the danger of defame. For well they wist that squire to be so bold, that no one beast in forest, wild or tame, met him in chase, but he at challenge wold, and plucked the prey oft times out of their greedy hold. The hardy boy, as they devised had, seeing the ugly monster passing by, upon him set, of peril not adread, ne skillful of the uncouth jeopardy, and charged him so fierce and furiously, that his great force unable to endure, he forced was to turn from him and fly. Yet ere he fled, he with his tooth impure him heedless bit, the whiles he was thereof secure. Securely he did after him pursue, thinking by speed to overtake his flight, who through thick woods and brakes and briars him drew, to weary him the more and waste his spite, so that he now has almost spent his sprite, till that at length unto a woody glade he came, whose covert stopped his further sight. There his three foes, shrouded in guileful shade, out of their ambush broke, and gan him to invade. Sharply they all at once did him assail, burning with inward rancor and despite, and heaped strokes did round about him hail, with so huge force that seemed nothing might bear off their blows from piercing thorough quite. Yet he them all so warily did ward, that none of them in his soft flesh did bite, and all the while his back for best safeguard he leant against a tree, that backward onset barred. Like a wild bull, that being at a bay is baited of a mastiff and a hound and a cur dog, that do him sharp assay on every side, and beat about him round, but most that cur, barking with bitter sound, and creeping still behind, doth him encumber, that in his chafe he digs the trampled ground, and threats his horns, and bellows like the thunder. So did that squire his foes disperse and drive asunder. Him well behooved so, for his three foes sought to encompass him on every side, and dangerously did round about enclose. But most of all Defetto him annoyed, creeping behind him still to have destroyed. So did Decetto eke him circumvent, but stout Despetto in his greater pride did front him face to face, against him bent. Yet he them all withstood, and often made relent, till that at length, nigh tired with former chase, and weary now with careful keeping ward, he gan to shrink, and somewhat to give place, full like ere long to have escaped hard. When as unwares he in the forest heard a trampling steed, that with his neighing fast did warn his rider be upon his guard. with noise whereof the squire now nigh aghast revived was, and sad despair away did cast. Eftsoons he spied a knight approaching nigh, who seeing one in so great danger set, mongst many foes himself did faster hie, to rescue him and his weak part abet, for pity so to see him overset. Whom soon as his three enemies did view, they fled, and fast into the wood did get. Him booted not to think them to pursue, the covert was so thick that did no passage shew. Then turning to that swain, him well he knew to be his Timaeus, his own true squire, whereof exceeding glad he to him drew, and him embracing twixt his arms entire, him thus bespake: My lief, my life's desire, why have ye me alone thus long yleft? Tell me, what world's despite or heaven's ire hath you thus long away from me bereft? Where have ye all this while been wandering? Where been weft? With that he sighed deep for inward tine, to whom the squire not answered again, but shedding few soft tears from tender eyne, his dear affect with silence did restrain, and shut up all his plaint in privy pain. There they a while some gracious speeches spent, as to them seemed fit time to entertain. After all which, up to their steeds they went, and forth together rode, a comely couplement. So now they be arrived both in sight of this wild man, whom they full busy found about the sad Serena things to dight, with those brave armors lying on the ground, that seemed the spoil of some right well renowned. Which when that squire beheld, he to them stepped, thinking to take them from that hilding hound. But he it seeing, lightly to him leapt, and sternly with strong hand it from his handling kept. Gnashing his grinded teeth with grisly look, and sparkling fire out of his furious eyne, him with his fist unwares on the head he strook, that made him down unto the earth incline. Whence soon upstarting, much he gan repine, and laying hand upon his wrathful blade, thought therewithal forthwith him to have slain. Who, it perceiving, hand upon him laid, and greedily him griping his avengement stayed. With that aloud the fair Serena cried unto the knight them to dispart in twain, who to them stepping did them soon divide, and did from further violence restrain, albeit the wild man hardly would refrain. Then gan the prince of her for to demand what and from whence she was, and by what train she fell into that savage villain's hand, and whether free with him she now were, or in band. To whom she thus: I am, as now ye see, the wretchedst dame that live this day on ground, who both in mind, the which most grieveth me, and body have received a mortal wound, that hath me driven to this dreary stound. I was erewhile the love of Calapine, who, whether he alive be to be found, or by some deadly chance be done to pine, since I him lately lost, uneath is to define. In savage forest I him lost of late, where I had surely long ere this been dead, or else remained in most wretched state, had not this wild man in that woeful stead kept, and delivered me from deadly dread. In such a savage wight, of brutish kind, amongst wild beasts in desert forests bred, it is most strange and wonderful to find so mild humanity and perfect gentle mind. Let me therefore this favor for him find, that ye will not your wrath upon him wreak, sith he cannot express his simple mind, ne yours conceive, ne but by tokens speak. Small praise to prove your power on wight so weak. With such fair words she did their heat assuage, and the strong course of their displeasure break. They to pity turned their former rage, and each sought to supply the office of her page. So, having all things well about her dight, she on her way cast forward to proceed, and they her forth conducted, where they might find harbor fit to comfort her great need. For now her wound's corruption gan to breed, and eke this squire, who likewise wounded was of that same monster late, for lack of heed, now gan to faint, and further could not pass through feebleness, which all his limbs oppressed has. So forth they rode together all in troop, to seek some place the which mote yield some ease to these sick twain, that now began to droop. And all the way the prince sought to appease the bitter anguish of their sharp disease, by all the courteous means he could invent, some while with merry purpose fit to please, and other while with good encouragement, to make them to endure the pains did them torment. Mongst which Serena did to him relate the foul discourtesies and unknightly parts which Turpin unto her had shewed late, without compassion of her cruel smarts, although Blandina did with all her arts him otherwise persuade, all that she might. Yet he of malice, without her desarts, not only her excluded late at night, but also traitorously did wound her weary knight. Wherewith the prince sore moved there avowed, that soon as he returned back again, he would avenge the abuses of that proud and shameful knight, of whom she did complain. This wise did they each other entertain, to pass the tedious travel of the way, till towards night they came unto a plain, by which a little hermitage there lay, far from all neighborhood, the which annoy it may. And nigh thereto a little chapel stood, which being all with ivy overspread, decked all the roof, and shadowing the rood, seemed like a grove fair branched overhead. Therein the hermit, which his life here led in strait observance of religious vow, was wont his hours and holy things to bed, and therein he likewise was praying now, when as these knights arrived, they wist not where nor how. They stayed not there, but straightway in did pass, whom when the hermit present saw in place, from his devotion straight he troubled was, which breaking off, he toward them did pace with stayed steps, and grave beseeming grace. For well it seemed that whilom he had been some goodly person and of gentle race, that could his good to all, and well did ween how each to entertain, and courtesy well beseen. And soothly it was said by common fame, so long as age enabled him thereto, that he had been a man of mickle name, renowned much in arms and daring do. But being aged now, and weary too of war's delight and world's contentious toil, the name of knighthood he did disavow, and hanging up his arms and warlike spoil, from all this world's encumbrance did himself assoil. He thence them led into his hermitage, letting their steeds to graze upon the green. Small was his house, and like a little cage for his own turn, yet inly neat and clean, decked with green boughs and flowers gay beseen. Therein he them full fair did entertain, not with such forged shows as fitter been for courting fools that courtesies would feign, but with entire affection and appearance plain. Yet was their fare but homely, such as he did use his feeble body to sustain, the which full gladly they did take in glee, such as it was, ne did of want complain, but being well suffised, them rested fain. But fair Serene all night could take no rest, ne yet that gentle squire, for grievous pain of their late wounds, the which the blatant beast had given them, whose grief through sufferance sore increased. So all that night they passed in great disease, till that the morning, bringing early light to guide men's labors, brought them also ease, and some assuagement of their painful plight. Then up they rose, and gan themselves to dight unto their journey. But that squire and dame so faint and feeble were, that they might endure to travel, nor one foot to frame. Their hearts were sick, their sides were sore, their feet were lame. Therefore the prince, whom great affairs in mind would not permit to make their languor stay, was forced there to leave them both behind in that good hermit's charge, whom he did pray to tend them well. So forth he went his way, and with him eke the salvage, that whileare seeing his royal usage and array was greatly grown in love of that brave peer, would needs depart, as shall declared be elsewhere.
End of Canto 5. Recording by Thomas Copeland. Book 6, Canto 6 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund SPENSER. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 6. The hermit heals both squire and dame of their sore maladies. He Turpin doth defeat, and shame for his late villainies. No wound which warlike hand of enemy inflicts with dint of sword, so sore doth light as doth the poisonous sting which infamy infixeth in the name of noble wight. For by no art, nor any leech's might, it ever can recured be again. Nay, all the skill which that immortal sprite of Podalirius did in it retain can remedy such hurts. Such hurts are hellish pain. Such were the wounds the which that blatant beast made in the bodies of that squire and dame, and being such, were now much more increased for want of taking heed unto the same, that now corrupt and cureless they became. Howbeit that careful hermit did his best with many kinds of medicines meet to tame the poisonous humor, which did most infest their rankling wounds, and every day them duly dressed. For he right well in leech's craft was seen, and through the long experience of his days, which had in many fortunes tossed been, and passed through many perilous assays, he knew the diverse went of mortal ways, and in the minds of men had great insight, which with sage counsel, when they went astray, he could inform, and them reduce aright, and all the passions heal which wound the weaker sprite. For whilome he had been a doughty knight, as any one that lived in his days, and proved oft in many perilous fight, of which he grace and glory won always, and in all battles bore away the bays. But being now attached with timely age, and weary of this world's unquiet ways, he took himself unto this hermitage, in which he lived alone, like careless bird in cage. One day, as he was searching of their wounds, he found that they had festered privily, and rankling inward with unruly stounds, the inner parts now gan to putrefy, that quite they seemed past help of surgery, but rather needed to be disciplined with wholesome rede of sad sobriety, to rule the stubborn rage of passion blind, give salves to every sore, but counsel to the mind. So taking them apart into his cell, he to that point fit speeches gan to frame, as he the art of words knew wondrous well, and eke could do as well as say the same. And thus he to them said: Fair daughter dame, and you fair son, which here thus long now lie in piteous languor, since ye hither came, in vain of me ye hope for remedy, and I likewise in vain do salves to you apply. For in yourself your only help doth lie, to heal yourselves, and must proceed alone from your own will to cure your malady. Who can him cure that will be cured of none? If therefore health ye seek, observe this one: first learn your outward senses to refrain from things that stir up frail affection. Your eyes, your ears, your tongue, your talk restrain from that they most affect, and in due terms contain. For from those outward senses ill affected, the seed of all this evil first doth spring, which at the first, before it had infected, mote easy be suppressed with little thing. But being grown strong, it forth doth bring sorrow and anguish and impatient pain in inner parts, and lastly, scattering contagious poison close through every vein, it never rests till it have wrought his final bane. For that beast's teeth, which wounded you tofore, are so exceeding venomous and keen, made all of rusty iron, rankling sore, that where they bite, it booteth not to wean with salve, or antidote, or other mean, it ever to amend. Ne marvel aught, for that same beast was bred of hellish streen, and long in darksome Stygian den upbrought, begot of foul Echidna, as in books is taught. Echidna is a monster direful dread, whom gods do hate, and heavens abhor to see. So hideous is her shape, so huge her head, that even the hellish fiends affrighted be at sight thereof, and from her presence flee. Yet did her face and former parts profess a fair young maiden full of comely glee, but all her hinder parts did plain express a monstrous dragon full of fearful ugliness. To her the gods, for her so dreadful face, in fearful darkness, furthest from the sky and from the earth, appointed have her place mongst rocks and caves, where she enrolled doth lie in hideous horror and obscurity, wasting the strength of her immortal age. There did Typhaon with her company, cruel Typhaon, whose tempestuous rage make heavens tremble oft, and him with vows assuage. Of that commixtion they did then beget this hellish dog, that hight the blatant beast, a wicked monster, that his tongue doth whet gainst all, both good and bad, both most and least, and pours his poisonous gall forth to infest the noblest wights with notable defame, ne ever knight that bore so lofty crest, ne ever lady of so honest name, but he them spotted with reproach or secret shame. In vain therefore it were with medicine to go about to salve such kind of sore, that rather needs wise rede and discipline than outward salves, that may augment it more. Ay me, said then Serena, sighing sore, what hope of help doth then for us remain, if that no salves may us to health restore? But sith we need good counsel, said the swain, areed, good sire, some counsel that may us sustain. The best, said he, that I can you advise, is to avoid the occasion of the ill. For when the cause whence evil doth arise removed is, the effect surceaseth still. Abstain from pleasure, and restrain your will, subdue desire, and bridle loose delight, use scanted diet, and forbear your fill, shun secrecy, and talk in open sight, so shall you soon repair your present evil plight. Thus having said, his sickly patients did gladly hearken to his grave behest, and kept so well his wise commandments, that in short space their malady was ceased, and eke the biting of that harmful beast was throughly healed. Though when they did perceive their wounds recured, and forces re-increased, of that good hermit both they took their leave, and went both on their way, ne each would other leave. But each the other vowed to company, the lady, for that she was much in dread, now left alone in great extremity. The squire, for that he courteous was indeed, would not her leave alone in her great need. So both together travelled, till they met with a fair maiden, clad in mourning weed, upon a mangy jade unmeetly set, and a lewd fool her leading thorough dry and wet. But by what means that shame to her befell, and how thereof herself she did acquite, I must a while forbear to you to tell, till that, as comes by course, I do recite what fortune to the Briton prince did light, pursuing that proud knight, the which whileare wrought to Sir Calidore so foul despite, and eke his lady, though she sickly were, so lewdly had abused, as ye did lately hear. The prince, according to the former token which fair Serene to him delivered had, pursued him straight, in mind to be ne roken of all the vile demean and usage bad, with which he had those two so ill bestad. Ne wight with him on that adventure went, but that wild man, whom though he oft forbade, yet for no bidding, nor for being shent, would he restrained be from his attendament. Arriving there, as did by chance befall, he found the gate wide ope, and in he rode, ne stayed till that he came into the hall, where soft dismounting like a weary load, upon the ground with feeble feet he trode, as he unable were for very need to move one foot, but there must make abode, the whiles the salvage man did take his steed, and in some stable near did set him up to feed. Ere long to him a homely groom there came, that in rude wise him asked what he was, that durst so boldly without let or shame into his lord's forbidden hall to pass. To whom the prince, him feigning to embase, mild answer made, he was an errant knight, the which was fallen into this feeble case through many wounds which lately he in fight received had, and prayed to pity his ill plight. But he, the more outrageous and bold, sternly did bid him quickly thence avaunt, or dear aby, for why his lord of old did hate all errant knights, which there did haunt, ne lodging would to any of them grant. and therefore lightly bade him pack away, not sparing him with bitter words to taunt, and therewithal rude hand on him did lay, to thrust him out of door, doing his worst to say. Which when the salvage, coming now in place, beheld, eftsoons he all enraged grew, and running straight upon that villain base, like a fell lion at him fiercely flew, and with his teeth and nails in present view him rudely rent, and all to pieces tore, so miserably him all helpless slew, that with the noise, whilst he did loudly roar, the people of the house rose forth in great uproar. Who, when on ground they saw their fellow slain, and that same knight and salvage standing by, upon them too they fell with might and main, and on them laid so huge and horribly, as if they would have slain them presently. But the bold prince defended him so well, and their assault withstood so mightily, that, maugre all their might, he did repel and beat them back, whilst many underneath him fell. Yet he them still so sharply did pursue, that few of them he left alive, which fled, those evil tidings to their lord to shew. Who, hearing how his people badly sped, came forth in haste, where, whenas with the dead he saw the ground all strowed, and that same knight and salvage with their blood fresh streaming red, he walks nigh mad with wrath and fell despite, and with reproachful words him thus bespake on height: Art thou he, traitor, that with treason vile hast slain my men in this unmanly manner? And now triumphest in the piteous spoil of these poor folk, whose souls with black dishonor and foul defame do deck thy bloody banner? The meed whereof shall shortly be thy shame and wretched end, which still attendeth honor. With that himself to battle he did frame, so did his 40 yeomen, which there with him came. With dreadful force they all did him assail, and round about with boisterous strokes oppress, that on his shield did rattle like to hail in a great tempest, that in such distress he wist not to which side him to address, and evermore that craven cowherd knight was at his back with heartless heediness, waiting if he unwares him murther might, for cowardize doth still in villainy delight. Whereof, whenas the prince was well aware, he to him turned with furious intent, and him against his power gan to prepare, like a fierce bull, that being busy bent to fight with many foes about him meant, feeling some cur behind his heels to bite, turns him about with fell avengement. So likewise turned the prince upon the knight, and laid at him amain with all his will and might. Who, when he once his dreadful strokes had tasted, durst not the fury of his force abide, but turned aback, and to retire him hasted through the thick press, there thinking him to hide. But when the prince had once him plainly eyed, he foot by foot him followed alway, ne would him suffer once to shrink aside, but joining close, huge load at him did lay, who flying still did ward, and warding fly away. But when his foe he still so eager saw, unto his heels himself he did betake, hoping unto some refuge to withdraw. Ne would the prince him ever foot forsake, whereso he went, but after him did make. He fled from room to room, from place to place, whilst every joint for dread of death did quake, still looking after him that did him chase. That made him evermore increase his speedy pace. At last he up into the chamber came, whereas his love was sitting all alone, waiting what tidings of her folk became. There did the prince him overtake anon, crying in vain to her him to bemoan, and with his sword him on the head did smite, that to the ground he fell in senseless swoon. Yet whether thwart or flatly it did light, the tempered steel did not into his brainpan bite. Which when the lady saw, with great affright, she starting up began to shriek aloud, and with her garment covering him from sight, seemed under her protection him to shroud, and falling lowly at his feet, her bowed upon her knee, entreating him for grace, and often him besought and prayed and vowed, that with the ruth of her so wretched case, he stayed his second stroke, and did his hand abase. Her weed she then withdrawing, did him discover, who now come to himself, yet would not rise, but still did lie as dead, and quake and quiver, that even the prince his baseness did despise, and eke his dame, him seeing in such guise, gan him recomfort, and from ground to rear, who rising up at last, in ghastly wise, like troubled ghost, did dreadfully appear, as one that had no life him left through former fear. Whom when the prince so deadly saw dismayed, he for such baseness shamefully him shent, and with sharp words did bitterly upbraid. Vile cowherd dog, now do I much repent that ever I this life unto thee lent, whereof thou, caitiff, so unworthy art, that both thy love for lack of hardiment, and eke thyself for want of manly heart, and eke all knights hast shamed with this knightless part. Yet further hast thou heaped shame to shame, and crime to crime, by this thy cowherd fear. For first it was to thee reproachful blame to erect this wicked custom, which I hear 'gainst errant knights and ladies thou dost rear, whom when thou mayst, thou dost of arms despoil, or of their upper garment which they wear. Yet dost thou not with manhood, but with guile maintain this evil use, thy foes thereby to foil. And lastly, in approvance of thy wrong, to show such faintness and foul cowardize is greatest shame. For oft it falls that strong and valiant knights do rashly enterprise, either for fame or else for exercise, a wrongful quarrel to maintain by fight, yet have through prowess and their brave emprise gotten great worship in this world's sight. For greater force there needs to maintain wrong than right. Yet since thy life unto this lady fair I given have, live in reproach and scorn, ne ever arms, ne ever knighthood dare hence to profess, for shame is to adorn with so brave badges one so basely born, but only breathe, sith that I did forgive. So having from his craven body torn those goodly arms, he them away did give, and only suffered him this wretched life to live. There, whilst he thus was settling things above, between that lady mild and recreant knight, to whom his life he granted for her love, he gan to think him in what perilous plight he had behind him left that salvage wight amongst so many foes, whom sure he thought by this quite slain in so unequal fight. Therefore descending back in haste he sought if yet he were alive, or to destruction brought. There he him found environed about with slaughtered bodies, which his hand had slain, and laying yet afresh with courage stout upon the rest that did alive remain, whom he likewise right sorely did constrain, like scattered sheep to seek for safety, after he gotten had with busy pain some of their weapons which thereby did lie, with which he laid about and made them fast to fly. Whom when the prince so felly saw to rage, approaching to him near, his hand he stayed, and sought by making signs him to assuage, who them perceiving, straight to him obeyed, as to his lord, and down his weapons laid, as if he long had to his hests been trained. Hence he him brought away, and up conveyed into the chamber, where that dame remained with her unworthy knight, who ill him entertained. Whom when the salvage saw from danger free, sitting beside his lady there at ease, he well remembered that the same was he which lately sought his lord for to displease, though all in rage he on him straight did seize, as if he would in pieces him have rent. And were not that the prince did him appease, he had not left one limb of him unrent, but straight he held his hand at his commandment. Thus, having all things well in peace ordained, the prince himself there all that night did rest, where him Blandina fairly entertained, with all the courteous glee and goodly feast, the which for him she could imagine best. For well she knew the ways to win good will of every wight, that were not too infest, and how to please the minds of good and ill, through tempering of her words and looks by wondrous skill. Yet were her words and looks but false and feigned, to some hid end to make more easy way, or to allure such fondlings whom she trained into her trap unto their own decay. Thereto, when needed, she could weep and pray, and when her listed, she could fawn and flatter. now smiling smoothly, like to summer's day, now glooming sadly, so to cloak her matter. Yet were her words but wind, and all her tears but water. Whether such grace were given her by kind, as women want their guileful wits to guide, or learned the art to please, I do not find. This well I wot, that she so well applied her pleasing tongue, that soon she pacified the wrathful prince, and wrought her husband's peace, who natheless, not therewith satisfied, his rancorous despite did not release, as secretly from thought of fell revenge surcease. For all that night, whiles the prince did rest in careless couch, not weeting what was meant, he watched in close await, with weapons pressed, willing to work his villainous intent on him that had so shamefully him shent. Yet durst he not, for very cowardize, effect the same, whilst all the night was spent. The morrow next the prince did early rise, and passed forth to follow his first enterprise.
End of Canto 6. Recording by Thomas Copeland. Book 6, Canto 7 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund SPENSER. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 7. Turpin is baffled. His two knights do gain their treason's meed. Fair Mirabella's punishment for love's disdain decreed. Like as the gentle heart itself bewrays in doing gentle deeds with frank delight, even so the baser mind itself displays in cankered malice and revengeful sprite. For to malign, to envy, t'use shifting slight, be arguments of a vile dunghill mind, which what it dare not do by open might, to work by wicked treason ways doth find, by such discourteous deeds discovering his base kind. That well appears in this discourteous knight, the coward Turpin, whereof now I treat, who, notwithstanding that in former fight he of the prince his life received late, yet in his mind malicious and ingrate he gan devise to be avenged anew for all that shame which kindled inward hate. Therefore, so soon as he was out of view, himself in haste he armed, and did him fast pursue. Well did he tract his steps as he did ride, yet would not near approach in danger's eye, but kept aloof, for dread to be descried, until fit time and place he mote espy, where he mote work him scath and villainy. At last he met two knights to him unknown, the which were armed both agreeably, and both combined whatever chance were blown betwixt them to divide, and each to make his own. To whom false Turpin coming courteously, to cloak the mischief which he inly meant, gan to complain of great discourtesy, which a strange knight that near afore him went had done to him and his dear lady shent. Which if they would afford him aid at need for to avenge in time convenient, they should accomplish both a knightly deed, and for their pains obtain of him a goodly meed. The knights believed that all he said was true, and being fresh and full of youthly sprite, were glad to hear of that adventure new, in which they mote make trial of their might, which never yet they had approved in fight, and eke desirous of the offered meed. Said then the one of them, "Where is that wight the which hath done to thee this wrongful deed, that we may it avenge and punish him with speed?" "He rides," said Turpin, "there not far for, with a wild man soft footing by his side, that if ye list to haste a little more, ye may him overtake in timely tide." Eftsoons they pricked forth with forward pride, and ere that little while they ridden had, the gentle prince not far away they spied, riding a softly pace, with portents sad, devising of his love more than of danger dread. Then one of them aloud unto him cried, bidding him turn again, false traitor knight, foul woman wronger, for he him defied. With that they both at once with equal spite did bend their spears, and both with equal might against him ran. But one did miss his mark, and being carried with his force forthright, glanced swiftly by, like to that heavenly spark which gliding through the air lights all the heavens dark. But thither, aiming better, did him smite full in the shield, with so impetuous power, that all his lance in pieces shivered quite, and, scattered all about, fell on the flower. But the stout prince, with much more steady stour, full on his beaver did him strike so sore, that the cold steel, through piercing, did devour his vital breath, and to the ground him bore, where still he bathed lay in his own bloody gore. As when a cast of falcons make their flight at an hern shaw that lies aloft on wing, the whiles they strike at him with heedless might, the wary fowl his bill doth backward wring, on which the first, whose force her first doth bring, herself quite through the body doth ingore, and falleth down to ground like senseless thing. But th'other, not so swift as she before, fails of her souse, and passing by doth hurt no more. By this the other, which was passed by, himself recovering, was returned to fight, where when he saw his fellow lifeless lie, he much was daunted with so dismal sight, yet not abating of his former spite, let drive at him with so malicious mind, as if he would have passed through him quite. But the steelhead no steadfast hold could find, but glancing by, deceived him of that he designed. Not so the prince, for his well-learned spear took surer hold, and from his horse's back above a lance's length him forth did bear, and 'gainst the cold hard earth so sore him strake, that all his bones in pieces nigh he brake. Where seeing him so lie, he left his steed, and to him leaping, vengeance thought to take of him for all his former follies meed, with flaming sword in hand his terror more to breed. The fearful swain, beholding death so nigh, cried out aloud for mercy him to save, in lieu whereof he would to him descry great treason to him meant, his life to reave. The prince soon hearkened, and his life forgave. Then thus said he, "There is a stranger knight, the which, for promise of great meed, us drave to this attempt, to wreak his hid despite, for that himself thereto did want sufficient might." The prince much mused at such villainy, and said, "Now sure ye well have earned your meed, for th' one is dead, and th'other soon shall die, unless to me thou hither bring with speed the wretch that hired you to this wicked deed. He, glad of life, and willing eke to wreak the guilt on him which did this mischief breed, swore by his sword that neither day nor week he would surcease, but him, whereso he were, would seek. So up he rose, and forth straightway he went back to the place where Turpin late he lore. There he him found in great astonishment to see him so bedight with bloody gore, and grisly wounds that him appalled sore. Yet thus at length he said, "How now, Sir Knight? What meaneth this which here I see before? How fortuneth this foul uncomely plight, so different from that which erst ye seemed in sight?" "Perdies," said he, "in evil hour it fell, that ever I for meed did undertake so hard a task, as life for hire to sell, the which I erst adventured for your sake. Witness the wounds, and this wide bloody lake, which ye may see yet all about me steam. Therefore now yield, as ye did promise make, my due reward, the which right well I deem I yearned have, that life so dearly did redeem." "But where then is," quoth he, half wrathfully, "where is the booty, which thereof I bought that cursed caitiff, my strong enemy, that recreant knight, whose hated life I sought? And where is eke your friend, which half it ought?" "He lies," said he, "upon the cold bare ground, slain of that errant knight, with whom he fought, whom afterwards myself with many a wound did slay again, as ye may see there in the stound." Thereof false Turpin was full glad and fain, and needs with him straight to the place would ride, where he himself might see his foeman slain, for else his fear could not be satisfied. So as they rode, he saw the way all dyed with streams of blood, which, tracting by the trail, ere long they came, whereas in evil tide that other swain, like ashes deadly pale, lay in the lap of death, rueing his wretched bale. Much did the craven seem to moan his case, that for his sake his dear life had forgone, and him bewailing with affection base, did counterfeit kind pity, where was none. For where's no courage, there's no ruth nor moan. Thence passing forth, not far away he found, whereas the prince himself lay all alone, loosely displayed upon the grassy ground, possessed of sweet sleep, that lulled him soft in swound. Weary of travel in his former fight, he there in shade himself had laid to rest, having his arms and warlike things undight, fearless of foes that mote his peace molest. The whiles his salvage page, that wont be pressed, was wandered in the wood another way, to do something that seemed to him best, the whiles his lord in silver slumber lay, like to the evening star adorned with dewy ray. Whom when as Turpin saw so loosely laid, he weened well that he indeed was dead, like as that other knight to him had said. But when he nigh approached, he mote read plain signs in him of life and livelihead, whereat much grieved against that stranger knight, that him too light of credence did mislead. He would have back retired from that sight, that was to him on earth the deadliest despite. But that same knight would not once let him start, but plainly gan to him declare the case of all his mischief and late luckless smart, how both he and his fellow there in place were vanquished, and put to foul disgrace, and how that he, in lieu of life him lent, had vowed unto the victor him to trace and follow through the world, whereso he went, till that he him delivered to his punishment. He therewith much abashed and afraid began to tremble every limb and vein, and softly whispering him, entirely prayed to advise him better than by such a train him to betray unto a stranger swain. Yet rather counselled him contrariwise, sith he likewise did wrong by him sustain, to join with him and vengeance to devise, whilst time did offer means him sleeping to surprise. Nathless, for all his speech, the gentle knight would not be tempted to such villainy, regarding more his faith which he did plight, all were it to his mortal enemy, than to entrap him by false treachery. Great shame in liege's blood to be embrued. Thus, whilst they were debating diversely, the salvage forth out of the wood issued, back to the place where as his lord he sleeping viewed. There, when he saw those two so near him stand, he doubted much what mote their meaning be, and throwing down his load out of his hand, to eat great store of forest fruit, which he had for his food late gathered from the tree, himself unto his weapon he betook, that was an oaken plant, which lately he rent by the root, which he so sternly shook, that like an hazel wand it quivered and quoke. Whereat the prince awaking, when he spied the traitor Turpin with that other knight, he started up, and snatching near his side his trusty sword, the servant of his might, like a fell lion leaped to him light, and his left hand upon his collar laid. Therewith the cowherd, deaded with affright, fell flat to ground, ne word unto him said, but holding up his hands with silence mercy prayed. But he so full of indignation was, that to his prayer naught he would incline, but as he lay upon the humbled grass, his foot he set on his vile neck, in sign of servile yoke, that nobler hearts repine. Then, letting him arise, like abject thrall, he gan to him object his heinous crime, and to revile and rate, and recreant call, and lastly to despoil of knightly banner all. And after all, for greater infamy, he by the heels him hung upon a tree, and baffled so that all which passed by the picture of his punishment might see, and by the like ensample warned be, however they through treason do trespass. But turn we now back to that lady free, whom late we left riding upon an ass, led by a carle and fool, which by her side did pass. She was a lady of great dignity, and lifted up to honorable place, famous through all the land of Faerie, though of mean parentage and kindred base, yet decked with wondrous gifts of nature's grace, that all men did her person much admire, and praise the feature of her goodly face, the beams whereof did kindle lovely fire in the hearts of many a knight and many a gentle squire. But she thereof grew proud and insolent, that none she worthy thought to be her fear, but scorned them all that love unto her meant. Yet was she loved of many a worthy peer, unworthy she to be beloved so dear, that could not weigh of worthiness aright. For beauty is more glorious, bright, and clear, the more it is admired of many a wight, and noblest she that served is of noblest knight. But this coy damsel thought contrariwise, that such proud looks would make her praised more, and that the more she did all loves despise, the more would wretched lovers her adore. What cared she who sighed for her sore, or who did wail or watch the weary night? Let them that list their luckless lot deplore. She was born free, not bound to any wight, and so would ever live and love her own delight. Through such her stubborn stiffness and hard heart, many a wretch, for want of remedy, did languish long in life-consuming smart, and at the last, through dreary dolour, die. Whilst she, the lady of her liberty, did boast her beauty had such sovereign might, that with the only twinkle of her eye she could or save or spill whom she would hight. What could the gods do more, but do it more aright? But lo, the gods that mortal follies view did worthily revenge this maiden's pride, and not regarding her so goodly hue, did laugh at her that many did deride, whilst she did weep, of no man mercified. For on a day when Cupid kept his court, as he is wont at each Saint Valentine, unto the which all lovers do resort, that of their love's success they there may make report, it fortuned then that when the rolls were read, in which the names of all love's folk were filed, that many there were missing, which were dead, or kept in bands, or from their loves exiled, or by some other violence despoiled. Which when as Cupid heard, he wexed wroth, and doubting to be wronged or beguiled, he bade his eyes to be unblindfold both, that he might see his men and muster them by oath. Then found he many missing of his crew, which wont do suit and service to his might, of whom what was becomen no man knew. Therefore a jury was impanelled straight, to enquire of them whether by force or sleight, or their own guilt, they were away conveyed, to whom foul infamy and fell despite gave evidence, that they were all betrayed and murdered cruelly by a rebellious maid. Fair Mirabella was her name, whereby of all those crimes she there indicted was. All which when Cupid heard, he by and by in great displeasure willed a Capias should issue forth to catch that scornful lass. The warrant straight was made, and therewithal a bailiff errant forth in post did pass, whom they by name their Portamore did call, he which doth summon lovers to love's judgment hall. The damsel was attached, and shortly brought unto the bar, whereas she was arraigned. But she thereto no plead nor answer aught, even for stubborn pride which her restrained. So judgment passed, as is by law ordained in cases like, which when at last she saw, her stubborn heart, which love before disdained, gan stoop, and falling down with humble awe, cried mercy to abate the extremity of law. The son of Venus, who is mild by kind, but where he is provoked with peevishness, unto her prayers piteously inclined, and did the rigor of his doom repress. Yet not so freely, but that natheless he unto her a penance did impose, which was, that through this world's wide wilderness she wander should in company of those, till she had saved so many loves as she did lose. So now she had been wandering 2 whole years throughout the world in this uncomely case, wasting her goodly hue in heavy tears, and her good days in dolorous disgrace. Yet had she not in all those 2 years' space saved but 2, yet in 2 years before, through her dispiteous pride, whilst love lacked place, she had destroyed 22 more. Ay me, how could her love make half amends therefore? And now she was upon the weary way, whenas the gentle squire, with fair Serene, met her in such misseeming foul array, the whiles that mighty man did her demean with all the evil terms and cruel mien that he could make, And eke that angry fool which followed her, with cursed hands unclean whipping her horse, did with his smarting tool oft whip her dainty self, and much augment her dule. Ne ought it mote avail her to entreat the one or th'other better her to use, for both so wilful were and obstinate, that all her piteous plaint they did refuse, and rather did the more her beat and bruise. But most the former villain, which did lead her tireling jade, was bent her to abuse, who, though she were with weariness nigh dead, yet would not let her light, nor rest a little stead. For he was stern and terrible by nature, and eke of person huge and hideous, exceeding much the measure of man's stature, and rather like a giant monstruous. Forsooth he was descended of the house of those old giants, which did wars darraign against the heaven in order battleless, and sib to great Orgoglio, which was slain by Arthur, when as Una's knight he did maintain. His looks were dreadful, and his fiery eyes like two great beacons, glared bright and wide, glancing askew, as if his enemies he scorned in his overweening pride, and stalking stately like a crane, did stride at every step upon the tiptoes high, and all the way he went, on every side he gazed about, and stared horribly, as if he with his looks would all men terrify. He wore no armor, ne for none did care, as no whit dreading any living wight, but in a jacket, quilted richly rare upon checklaton, he was strangely dight, and on his head a roll of linen plight, like to the Moors of Malabar he wore, with which his locks, as black as pitchy night, were bound about, and voided from before, and in his hand a mighty iron club he bore. This was Disdain, who led that lady's horse through thick and thin, through mountains and through plains, compelling her where she would not by force, hailing her palfrey by the hempen reins. But that same fool which most increased her pains was Scorn, who, having in his hand a whip, her therewith yerks, and still when she complains, the more he laughs, and does her closely quip, to see her sore lament, and bite her tender lip. Whose cruel handling when that squire beheld, and saw those villains her so vilely used, his gentle heart with indignation swelled, and could no longer bear so great abuse, as such a lady so to beat and bruise. But to him stepping, such a stroke him lent, that forced him th'altar from his hand to loose, and maugre all his might back to relent, else had he surely there been slain, or foully shent. The villain, wroth for greeting him so sore, gathered himself together soon again, and with his iron baton which he bore, let drive at him so dreadfully amain, that for his safety he did him constrain to give him ground, and shift to every side, rather than once his burden to sustain. For bootless thing him seemed to abide so mighty blows, or prove the puissance of his pride. Like as a mastiff, having at a bay a salvage bull, whose cruel horns do threat desperate danger, if he them assay, traceth his ground, and round about doth beat, to spy where he may some advantage get, the whiles the beast doth rage and loudly roar. So did the squire, the whiles the carle did fret and fume in his disdainful mind the more, and oftentimes by Termagant and Mahound swore. Nathless, so sharply still he him pursued, that at advantage him at last he took, when his foot slipped. That slip he dearly rued, and with his iron club to ground him strook, where still he lay, ne out of swoon awoke, till heavy hand the carle upon him laid, and bound him fast. Though when he up did look, and saw himself captived, he was dismayed, ne power had to withstand, ne hope of any aid. Then up he made him rise, and forward fair led in a rope, which both his hands did bind. Ne aught that fool for pity did him spare, but with his whip him following behind, him often scourged, and forced his feet to find. And other whiles with bitter mocks and mows he would him scorn, that to his gentle mind was much more grievous than the other's blows. Words sharply wound, but greatest grief of scorning grows. The fair Serena, When she saw him fall under that villain's club, then surely thought that slain he was, or made a wretched thrall, and fled away with all the speed she mought to seek for safety, which long time she sought, and passed through many perils by the way, ere she again to Calopine was brought. The which discourse as now I must delay, till Mirabella's fortunes I do further say.
End of Canto 7. Recording by Thomas Copeland. Book 6, Canto 8 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund SPENSER. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 8. Prince Arthur overcomes disdain, quites Mirabell from dreed. Serena, found of salvages, by Calopine is freed. Ye gentle ladies, in whose sovereign power love hath the glory of his kingdom left, and the hearts of men, as your eternal dower, in iron chains of liberty bereft, delivered hath into your hands by gift, be well aware how ye the same do use, that pride do not to tyranny you lift, lest if men you of cruelty accuse, he from you take that chiefdom which ye do abuse. And as ye soft and tender are by kind, adorned with goodly gifts of beauty's grace, so be ye soft and tender eke in mind, but cruelty and hardness from you chase, that all your other praises will deface, and from you turn the love of men to hate. An example take of Mirabella's case, who from the high degree of happy state fell into wretched woes, which she repented late. Who, after thraldom of the gentle squire, which she beheld with lamentable eye, was touched with compassion entire, and much lamented his calamity, that for her sake fell into misery, which booted not for prayers, nor for threat to hope for to release or mollify. For the more that she did them entreat, the more they him misused, and cruelly did beat. So as they forward on their way did pass, him still reviling and afflicting sore, they met Prince Arthur and Sir Enneas, that was that courteous knight whom he before, having subdued, yet did to life restore. To whom as they approached, they gan augment their cruelty, and him to punish more, scourging and hailing him more vehement, as if it them should grieve to see his punishment. The squire himself, when as he saw his lord the witness of his wretchedness in place, was much ashamed, that with an hempen cord he like a dog was led in captive case, and did his head for bashfulness abase, as loath to see or to be seen at all, shame would be hid. But when as Enneas beheld two such villains thrall, his manly mind was much immoved therewithal, and to the prince thus said: See you, sir knight, the greatest shame that ever I yet saw, yond lady and her squire with foul despite abused, against all reason and all law, without regard of pity or of awe. See how they do that squire beat and revile, see how they do the lady hail and draw. But if ye please to lend me leave a while, I will them soon acquite, and both of blame assoil. The prince assented, and then he straightway dismounting light, his shield about him threw, with which approaching, thus he gan to say: Abide, ye caitiff treachetours untrue, that have with treason thralled unto you these two, unworthy of your wretched bands, and now your crime with cruelty pursue. Abide, and from them lay your loathly hands, or else abide the death that hard before you stands. The villain stayed not answer to invent, but with his iron club preparing way, his mind's sad message back unto him sent, the which descended with such dreadful sway, that seemed not the course thereof could stay, no more than lightning from the lofty sky, ne list the knight the power thereof assay, whose doom was death, but lightly slipping by unwares, defrauded his intended destiny. And to requite him with the like again, with his sharp sword he fiercely at him flew, and strook so strongly, that the carle with pain saved himself, but that he there him slew. Yet saved not so, but that the blood it drew, and gave his foe good hope of victory, who therewith fleshed, upon him set anew, and with the second stroke sought certainly to have supplied the first, and paid the usury. But fortune answered not unto his call, For as his hand was heaved up on height, the villain met him in the middle fall, and with his club bet back his brand iron bright so forcibly, that with his own hand's might rebeaten back upon himself again, he driven was to ground in self-despite. From whence, ere he recovery could gain, he in his neck had set his foot with fell disdain. With that the fool, which did that end await, came running in, and whilst on ground he lay, laid heavy hands on him, and held so strait, that down he kept him with his scornful sway, so that he could not weld him any way. The whiles that other villain went about him to have bound and thralled without delay, whiles the fool did him revile and flout, threatening to yoke them to and tame their courage stout. As when a sturdy ploughman with his hind by strength have overthrown a stubborn steer, they down him hold, and fast with cords do bind, till they him force the buxom yoke to bear. So did these two this night oft tug and tear, which when the prince beheld, there standing by, he left his lofty steed to aid him near, and buckling soon himself, gan fiercely fly upon that carle to save his friend from jeopardy. The villain, leaving him unto his mate, to be captived and handled as he list, himself addressed unto his new debate, and with his club him all about so blist, that he which way to turn him scarcely wist. Sometimes aloft he laid, sometimes alow, now here, now there, and oft him near he missed, so doubtfully that hardly one could know whether more wary were to give or ward the blow. But yet the prince so well inured was with such huge strokes, approved oft in fight, that way to them he gave forthright to pass, ne would endure the danger of their might, but waited vantage when they down did light. At last the caitiff, after long discourse, when all his strokes he saw avoided quite, resolved in one to assemble all his force, and make one end of him without ruth or remorse. His dreadful hand he heaved up aloft, and with his dreadful instrument of ire, thought sure have pounded him to powder soft, or deep embowelled in the earth entire. But fortune did not with his will conspire, for ere his stroke attained his intent, the noble child, preventing his desire, under his club with wary boldness went, and smote him on the knee, that never yet was bent. It never yet was bent, ne bent it now, albe the stroke so strong and puissant were, that seemed a marble pillar it could bow. But all that leg which did his body bear, it cracked throughout, yet did no blood appear, so as it was unable to support so huge a burden on such broken gear, but fell to ground, like to a lump of dirt, whence he essayed to rise, but could not for his hurt. Eftsoons the prince to him full nimbly stepped, and lest he should recover foot again, his head meant from his shoulders to have swept. Which when the lady saw, she cried amain, "Stay, stay, Sir Knight, for love of God abstain from that unwares ye weetless do intend. Slay not that carle, though worthy to be slain, for more on him doth than himself depend. My life will by his death have lamentable end." He stayed his hand according her desire, yet not the more him suffered to arise, but still suppressing, gan of her inquire what meaning mote those uncouth words comprise, that in that villain's health her safety lies, that were no might in man, nor heart in knights, which durst her dreaded rescue enterprise, yet heavens themselves, that favor feeble rights, would for itself redress and punish such despites. Then bursting forth in tears, which gushed fast, like many water streams, a while she stayed, till the sharp passion being overpast, her tongue to her restored, then thus she said: "Nor heavens nor men can me, most wretched maid, deliver from the doom of my desart, the which the God of love hath on me laid, and damned to endure this direful smart, for penance of my proud and hard rebellious heart. In prime of youthly years, when first the flower of beauty gan to bud, and blossom delight, and nature me endued with plenteous dower of all her gifts, that pleased each living sight, I was beloved of many a gentle knight, and sued and sought with all the service due. Full many a one for me deep groaned and sight, and to the door of death for sorrow drew, complaining out on me that would not on them rue. But let them love that list, or live or die, me list not die for any lover's duel. Ne list me leave my loved liberty, to pity him that list to play the fool. To love myself I learned had in school. Thus I triumphed long in lovers' pain, and sitting careless on the scorner's stool, did laugh at those that did lament and plain. But all is now repaid with interest again. For lo, the winged God that woundeth hearts caused me be called to account therefore, and for revengement of those wrongful smarts, which I to others did inflict afore, had deemed me to endure this penance sore. That in this wise, and this unmeet array, with these two lewd companions, and no more, disdain and scorn, I through the world should stray, till I have saved so many as I erst did slay. Certes, said then the prince, the God is just, that taketh vengeance of his people's spoil. For were no law in love, but all that lust might them oppress and painfully turmoil, his kingdom would continue but a while. But tell me, lady, wherefore do you bear this bottle thus before you with such toil, and eke this wallet at your back arear, that for these carles to carry much more comely were? Here in this bottle, said the sorry maid, I put the tears of my contrition, till to the brim I have it full defrayed. And in this bag, which I behind me don, I put repentance for things past and gone. Yet is the bottle leak, and bag so torn, that all which I put in falls out anon, and is behind me trodden down of scorn, who mocketh all my pain, and laughs the more I mourn. The infant hearkened wisely to her tale, and wondered much at Cupid's judgment wise, that could so meekly make proud hearts avail, and wreak himself on them that him despise. Then suffered he disdain up to arise, who was not able up himself to rear, by means his leg, through his late luckless prize, was cracked in twain, but by his foolish fear was holpen up, who him supported standing near. But being up, he looked again aloft, as if he never had received fall, and with stern eyebrows stared at him oft, as if he would have daunted him with all, and standing on his tiptoes to seem tall, down on his golden feet he often gazed, as if such pride the other could appall, who was so far from being aught amazed, that he his looks despised, and his boast dispraised. Then turning back unto that captive thrall, who all this while stood there beside them bound, unwilling to be known or seen at all, he from those bands weened him to have unwound. But when approaching near he plainly found it was his own true groom, the gentle squire, he thereat waxed exceedingly astound, and him did oft embrace and oft admire, but could with seeing satisfy his great desire. Meanwhile the salvage man, when he beheld that huge great fool oppressing the other knight, whom with his weight unwieldy down he held, he flew upon him like a greedy kite unto some carrion offered to his sight, and down him plucking, with his nails and teeth gan him to hail and tear and scratch and bite, and from him taking his own whip, therewith so sore him scourgeth, that the blood down followeth. And sure I ween, had not the lady's cry procured the prince his cruel hand to stay, he would with whipping him have done to die, but being checked, he did abstain straightway, and let him rise. Then thus the prince gan say, now, lady, sith your fortunes thus dispose, that if ye list have liberty ye may, unto yourself I freely leave to choose, whether I shall you leave, or from these villains loose. Ah nay, sir knight, said she, it may not be, but that I needs must by all means fulfill this penance, which enjoined is to me, lest unto me betide a greater ill, yet no less thanks to you for your good will. So humbly taking leave she turned aside, but Arthur with the rest went onward still on his first quest, in which did him betide a great adventure, which did him from them divide. But first it falleth me by course to tell of fair Serena, who, as erst you heard, when first the gentle squire at variance fell with those two carles, fled fast away, afeard of villainy to be to her inferred. So fresh the image of her former dread, yet dwelling in her eye, to her appeared, that every foot did tremble which did tread, and every body two and two she four did read. Through hills and dales, through bushes and through briers, long thus she fled, till that at last she thought herself now past the peril of her fears. Then looking round about, and seeing naught which doubt of danger to her offer mought, she from her palfrey lighted on the plain, and sitting down, herself a while bethought of her long travel and tomoiling pain, and often did of love, and oft of luck complain. And evermore she blamed Calipene, the good Sir Calipene, her own true knight, as the only author of her woeful tyne, for being of his love to her so light, as her to leave in such a piteous plight. Yet never turtle truer to his make than he was tried unto his lady bright, who all this while endured for her sake great peril of his life, and restless pains did take. Though when as all her plaint she had displayed, and well disburdened her engrieved breast, upon the grass herself adown she laid, where being tired with travel, and oppressed with sorrow, she betook herself to rest. There whilst in Morpheus' bosom safe she lay, fearless of aught that mote her peace molest, false fortune did her safety betray unto a strange mischance that menaced her decay. In these wild deserts, where she now abode, there dwelt a savage nation, which did live of stealth and spoil, and making nightly rode into their neighbors' borders. They did give themselves to any trade, as for to drive the painful plough, or cattle for to breed, or by adventurous merchandise to thrive, but on the labors of poor men to feed, and serve their own necessities with others' need. Thereto they used one most accursed order, to eat the flesh of men, whom they mote find, and strangers to devour, which on their border were brought by error or by wreckful wind. A monstrous cruelty gainst course of kind. They towards evening, wandering every way to seek for booty, came by fortune blind, whereas this lady, like a sheep astray, now drowned in the depth of sleep, all fearless lay. Soon as they spied her, Lord, what gladful glee they made amongst themselves! But when her face like the fair ivory shining they did see, each gan his fellow solace and embrace, for joy of such good hap by heavenly grace. Then gan they to devise what course to take, whether to slay her there upon the place, or suffer her out of her sleep to wake, and then her eat at once, or many meals to make. The best advisement was, of bad, to let her sleep out her fill without encumberment, for sleep, they said, would make her battle better. Then when she waked, they all gave one consent, that since by grace of God she there was sent, unto their God they would her sacrifice, whose share, her guiltless blood, they would present, but of her dainty flesh they did devise to make a common feast, and feed with gourmandise. So round about her they themselves did place upon the grass, and diversely dispose, as each thought best to spend the lingering space. Some with their eyes the daintest morsels chose, some praise her paps, some praise her lips and nose, some whet their knives, and strip their elbows bare. The priest himself a garland doth compose of finest flowers, and with full busy care his bloody vessels wash, and holy fire prepare. The damsel wakes, then all at once upstart, and round about her flock like many flies, whooping and hallowing on every part, as if they would have rent the brazen skies. Which when she sees with ghastly griefful eyes, her heart does quake, and deadly pallid hue benumbs her cheeks. Then out aloud she cries, where none is nigh to hear, that will her rue, and rends her golden locks, and snowy breasts embrue. But all boots not. They hands upon her lay, and first they spoil her of her jewels dear, and afterwards of all her rich array, the which amongst them they in pieces tear, and of the prey each one a part doth bear. Now being naked, to their sordid eyes the goodly treasures of nature appear, which as they view with lustful fantasies, each wisheth to himself, and to the rest envies. Her ivory neck, her alabaster breast, her paps, which like two silken pillows were, for love in soft delight thereon to rest, her tender sides, her belly white and clear, which like an altar did itself uprear, to offer sacrifice divine thereon, her goodly thighs, whose glory did appear like a triumphal arch, and thereupon the spoils of princes hanged, which were in battle won. Those dainty parts, the dearlings of delight, which mote not be profaned of common eyes, those villains viewed with loose lascivious sight, and closely tempted with their crafty spies. And some of them gan mongst themselves devise thereof by force to take their beastly pleasure. But them the priest rebuking did advise to dare not to pollute so sacred treasure, vowed to the gods, religion held even thieves in measure. So being stayed, they her from thence directed unto a little grove not far aside, in which an altar shortly they erected to slay her on. And now the eventide his broad black wings had through the heavens wide by this dispread, that was the time ordained for such a dismal deed their guilt to hide. A few green turfs an altar soon they feigned, and decked it all with flowers, which they nigh hand obtained. Though, when as all things ready were aright, the damsel was before the altar set, being already dead with fearful fright, to whom the priest, with naked arms full net, approaching nigh, and murderous knife well whet, gan mutter close a certain secret charm, with other divilish ceremonies met. Which done, he gan aloft advance his arm, whereat they shouted all, and made a loud alarm. Then gan the bagpipes and the horns to shrill and shriek aloud, that with the people's voice confused did the air with terror fill, and made the wood to tremble at the noise. The while she wailed, the more they did rejoice. Now mote ye understand that to this grove Sir Calipene, by chance more than by choice, the self same evening fortune hither drove, as he to seek Serena through the woods did rove. Long had he sought her, and through many a soil had travelled still on foot in heavy arms, ne aught was tired with his endless toils, ne aught was feared of his certain harms, and now, all weetless of the wretched storms in which his love was lost, he slept full fast, till being waked with these loud alarms, he lightly started up like one aghast, and catching up his arms, straight to the noise forth passed. There by the uncertain glimpse of starry night, and by the twinkling of their sacred fire, he mote perceive a little dawning sight of all which there was doing in that choir, mongst whom a woman spoiled of all attire he spied, lamenting her unlucky strife, and groaning sore from grieved heart entire. Eftsoons he saw one with a naked knife, ready to launce her breast, and let out loved life. With that he thrusts into the thickest throng, and even as his right hand adown descends, he him preventing, lays on earth along, and sacrificeth to the infernal fiends. Then to the rest his wrathful hand he bends, of whom he makes such havoc and such hue, that swarms of damned souls to hell he sends. The rest, that scape his sword and death eschew, fly like a flock of doves before a falcon's view. From them returning to that lady back, whom by the altar he doth sitting find, yet fearing death, and next to death the lack of clothes, to cover what they ought by kind, he first her hands beginneth to unbind, and then to question of her present woe, and afterwards to cheer with speeches kind. But she, for naught that he could say or do, one word durst speak, or answer him a whit thereto. So inward shame of her uncomely case she did conceive, through care of womanhood, that though the night did cover her disgrace, yet she in so unwomanly a mood would not bewray the state in which she stood. So all that night to him unknown she passed. But day, that doth discover bad and good, ensuing, made her known to him at last, the end whereof I'll keep until another cast.
End of Canto 8. Recording by Thomas Copeland. Book 6, Canto 9 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund SPENSER. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 9. Calidore hosts with Melibea and love's fair pastorelle. Corydon envies him, yet he for ill rewards him well. Now turn again my team, thou jolly swain, back to the furrow which I lately left. I lately left a furrow one or twain unplowed, the which my coulter hath not cleft. Yet seemed the soil both fair and fruitful eft, as I it passed, that were too great a shame that so rich fruit should be from us bereft. Besides the great dishonour and defame which should befall to Calidor's immortal name. Great travel hath the gentle Calidor and toil endured, sith I left him last, suing the blatant beast, which I forbore to finish then for other present haste. Full many paths and perils he hath passed, through hills and dales, through forests and through plains, in that same quest which fortune on him cast, which he achieved to his own great gains, reaping eternal glory of his restless pains. So sharply he the monster did pursue, that day nor night he suffered him to rest, ne rested he himself, but nature's due, for dread of danger, not to be redressed, if he for sloth forslacked so famous quest. Him first from court he to the cities coursed, and from the cities to the towns impressed, and from the towns into the country forced, and from the country back to private farms he scorsed. From thence into the open fields he fled, whereas the herds were keeping of their neat, and shepherds singing to their flocks that fed, lays of sweet love and youth's delightful heat. Him thither eke, for all his fearful threat, he followed fast, and chased him so nigh, that to the folds where sheep at night do seat, and to the little cots where shepherds lie in winter's wrathful time, he forced him to fly. There on a day, as he pursued a chase, he chanced to spy a sort of shepherd grooms playing on pipes and carolling apace, the whiles their beasts there in the budded brooms beside them fed, and nipped the tender blooms. For other worldly wealth they cared not. To whom Sir Calidore, yet sweating, comes, and them to tell him courteously besought, if such a beast they saw, which he had thither brought. They answered him that no such beast they saw, nor any wicked fiend that mote offend their happy flocks, nor danger to them draw. But if that such there were, as none they kenned, they prayed high God him far from them to send. Then one of them, him seeing so to sweat, after his rustic wise that well he weened, offered him drink, to quench his thirsty heat, and if he hungry were, he offered eke to eat. The knight was nothing nice, where was no need, and took their gentle offer. So adown they prayed him sit, and gave him for to feed such homely what as serves the simple clown, that doth despise the dainties of the town. Though having fed his fill, he there beside saw a fair damsel, which did wear a crown of sundry flowers with silken ribbons tied, clad in home-made green that her own hands had dyed. Upon a little hillock she was placed, higher than all the rest, and round about environed with a girland goodly graced of lovely lasses, and them all without the lusty shepherd swains sate in a rout, the which did pipe and sing her praises due, and oft rejoice, and oft for wonder shout, as if some miracle of heavenly hue were down to them descended in that earthly view. And soothly sure she was full fair of face, and perfectly well shaped in every limb, which she did more augment with modest grace and comely carriage of her countenance trim, that all the rest like lesser lamps did dim, who, her admiring as some heavenly wight, did for their sovereign goddess her esteem, and carolling her name both day and night, the fairest pastorella her by name did hight. Ne was there herd, nor was there shepherd's swain, but did her honor, and eke many a one burnt in her love, and with sweet pleasing pain, full many a night for her did sigh and groan. But most of all the shepherd Corydon for her did languish, and his dear life spend. Yet neither she for him nor other one did care a whit, ne any liking lend. Though mean her lot, yet higher did her mind ascend. Her while Sir Calidore there viewed well, and marked her rare demeanour, which him seemed so far the mean of shepherds to excel, as that he in his mind her worthy deemed to be a prince's paragon esteemed. He was unwares surprised in subtle bands of the blind boy, ne thence could be redeemed by any skill out of his cruel hands. caught like the bird which gazing still on others stands. So stood he still long gazing thereupon, ne any will had thence to move away, although his quest were far afore him gone. But after he had fed, yet did he stay, and sate there still, until the flying day was far forth spent, discoursing diversely of sundry things, as fell to work delay. And evermore his speech he did apply to the herds, but meant them to the damsel's fantasy. By this the moisty night approaching fast, her dewy humor gan on the earth to shed, that warned the shepherds to their homes to hast their tender flocks, now being fully fed, for fear of wetting them before their bed. Then came to them a good old aged sire, whose silver locks bedecked his beard and head, with shepherd's hook in hand and fit attire, that willed the damsel rise. The day did now expire. He was, to weet, by common voice esteemed, the father of the fairest pastorelle, and of herself in very deed so deemed. Yet was not so, but as old stories tell, found her by fortune, which to him befell in th'open fields, an infant left alone, and taking up brought home, and nursed well as his own child, for other he had none, that she in tract of time accounted was his own. She at his bidding meekly did arise, and straight into her little flock did fare. Then all the rest about her rose likewise, and each his sundry sheep with several care gathered together, and them homeward bare, whilst every one with helping hands did strive amongst themselves, and did their labors share, to help fair Pastorella home to drive her fleecy flock. But Corydon most help did give. But Melibee, so hight that good old man, now seeing Calidore left all alone, and night arrived hard at hand, began him to invite unto his simple home, which, though it were a cottage clad with loam, and all things therein mean, yet better so to lodge than in the salvage fields to roam. The knight full gladly soon agreed thereto, being his heart's own wish, and home with them did go. There he was welcomed of that honest sire, and of his aged beldame homely well, who him besought himself to disattire, and rest himself till supper time befell, by which home came the fairest pastorelle, after her flock she in the fold had tied. And supper ready dight, they to it fell with small ado, and nature satisfied, the which doth little crave, contented to abide. Though when they had their hunger slaked well, and the fair maid the table ta'en away, the gentle knight, as he that did excel in courtesy, and well could do and say, for so great kindness as he found that day, gan greatly thank his host and his good wife, and drawing thence his speech another way, gan highly to commend the happy life which shepherds lead, without debate or bitter strife. How much, said he, more happy is the state in which ye, father, here do dwell at ease, leading a life so free and fortunate from all the tempests of these worldly seas, which toss the rest in dangerous disease, where wars and wrecks and wicked enmity do them afflict, which no man can appease. That certes I your happiness envy, and wish my lot were placed in such felicity. Surely, my son, then answered he again, if happy, then it is in this intent, that having small, yet do I not complain of want, ne wish for more it to augment, but do myself with that I have content. So taught of nature, which doth little need of foreign helps to life's due nourishment, the fields my food, my flock my raiment breed, no better do I wear, no better do I feed. Therefore I do not any one envy, nor am envied of any one therefore. They that have much fear much to lose thereby, and store of cares doth follow riches' store. The little that I have grows daily more, without my care, but only to attend it. My lambs do every year increase their score, and my flock's father daily doth amend it. What have I but to praise th' Almighty that doth send it? To them that list the world's gay shows I leave, and to great ones such follies do forgive, which oft through pride do their own peril weave, and through ambition down themselves do drive to sad decay, that might contented live. Me no such cares nor cumbrous thoughts offend, no once my mind's unmoved quiet grieve, but all the night in silver sleep I spend, and all the day to what I list I do attend. Sometimes I hunt the fox, the vowed foe unto my lambs, and him dislodge away. Sometime the fawn I practice from the doe, or from the goat her kid how to convey. Another while I baits and nets display, the birds to catch, or fishes to beguile. And when I weary am, I down do lay my limbs in every shade, to rest from toil, and drink of every brook, when thirst my throat doth boil. The time was once in my first prime of years, when pride of youth forth pricked my desire, that I disdained amongst mine equal peers to follow sheep, and shepherds' base attire. For further fortune then I would inquire, and leaving home, to royal court I sought, where I did sell myself for yearly hire, and in the prince's garden daily wrought. There I beheld such vainness as I never thought, with sight whereof soon cloyed, and long deluded with idle hopes, which them do entertain. After I had 10 years myself excluded from native home, and spent my youth in vain, I gan my follies to myself to plain, and this sweet peace, whose lack did then appear. Though back returning to my sheep again, I from thenceforth have learned to love more dear this lowly quiet life, which I inherit here. Whilst thus he talked, the night with greedy ear hung still upon his melting mouth attent, whose senseful words empierced his heart so near, that he was rapt with double ravishment, both of his speech, that wrought him great content, and also of the object of his view, on which his hungry eye was always bent, that twixt his pleasing tongue and her fair hue he lost himself, and like one half entranced grew. Yet to occasion means to work his mind, and to insinuate his heart's desire, he thus replied: "Now surely, sire, I find that all this world's gay shows, which we admire, be but vain shadows to this safe retire of life, which here in lowliness ye lead, fearless of foes, or fortune's wrackful ire, which tosseth states, and under foot doth tread the mighty ones, afraid of every change's dread. That even I, which daily do behold the glory of the great, mongst whom I won, and now have proved what happiness ye hold in this small plot of your dominion, now loathe great lordship and ambition, and wish the heavens so much had graced me, as grant me live in like condition, or that my fortunes might transposed be from pitch of higher place unto this low degree. In vain, said then old Melody, do men the heavens of their fortunes' fault accuse, sith they know best what is the best for them. For they to each such fortune do diffuse, as they do know each can most aptly use. For not that which men covet most is best, nor that thing worst which men do most refuse, but fittest is that all contented rest with that they hold, each hath his fortune in his breast. It is the mind that maketh good or ill, that maketh wretch or happy, rich or poor. For some that hath abundance at his will hath not enough, but wants in greatest store, and other that hath little asks no more, but in that little is both rich and wise, for wisdom is most richest. Fools therefore they are, which fortunes do by vows devise, sith each unto himself his life may fortunize. Since then in each man's self, said Calidore, it is to fashion his own life's estate, give leave a while, good father, in this shore to rest my bark, which hath been beaten late with storms of fortune and tempestuous fate, in seas of trouble and of toilsome pain, that whether quite from them for to retreat I shall resolve, or back to turn again, I may here with yourself some small repose obtain. Not that the burden of so bold a guest shall chargeful be, or change to you at all, for your mean food shall be my daily feast, and this your cabin both my bower and hall. Besides, for recompense hereof, I shall you well reward, and golden guerdon give, that may perhaps you better much withal, and in this quiet make you safer live. So forth he drew much gold, and toward him it drive. But the good man, not tempted with the offer of his rich mould, did thrust it far away, and thus bespake: Sir Knight, your bounteous proffer be far from me, to whom ye ill display that mucky mass, the cause of men's decay, that mote impair my peace with dangers dread. But if ye algates covet to assay the simple sort of life that shepherds lead, be it your own, our rudeness to yourself a rede. So there that night Sir Calidore did dwell, and long time after, whilst him list remain, daily beholding the fair pastorelle, and feeding on the bait of his own bane. During which time he did her entertain with all kind courtesies he could invent, and every day, her company to gain, when to the field she went, he with her went, so for to quench his fire, he did it more augment. But she that never had acquainted been with such quaint usage, fit for queens and kings, ne ever had such knightly service seen, but being bred under base shepherds' wings, had ever learned to love the lowly things, did little whit regard his courteous guise, but cared more for Colin's carolings than all that he could do or ever devise. His lays, his loves, his looks, she did them all despise. Which Calidore perceiving, thought it best to change the manner of his lofty look, and doffing his bright arms, himself addressed in shepherd's weed, and in his hand he took, instead of steelhead spear, a shepherd's hook, that who had seen him then would have bethought of Phrygian Paris by Plexippus brook, when he the love of fair Oenone sought, what time the golden apple was unto him brought. So being clad, unto the fields he went with the fair pastorella every day, and kept her sheep with diligent attent, watching to drive the ravenous wolf away, the whilst at pleasure she mote sport and play, and every evening helping them to fold. And other whiles, for need, he did assay in his strong hand their rugged teats to hold, and out of them to press the milk, love so much cold. Which seeing Corydon, who her likewise long time had loved, and hoped her love to gain, he much was troubled at that stranger's guise, and many jealous thoughts conceived in vain, that this of all his labor and long pain should reap the harvest, ere it ripened were. That made him scowl and pout, and oft complain of pastorelle to all the shepherds there, that she did love a stranger swain than him more dear. And ever when he came in company where Calidore was present, he would lour and bite his lip, and even for jealousy was ready oft his own heart to devour, impatient of any paramour. Who on the other side did seem so far from malicing or grudging his good hour, that all he could he graced him with her, ne ever showed sign of rancor or of jar. And oft when Corydon unto her brought of little sparrows stolen from their nest, or wanton squirrels in the woods far sought, or other dainty thing for her addressed, he would commend his gift, and make the best. Yet she no whit his presence did regard, ne him could find to fancy in her breast. This new-come shepherd had his market marred. Old love is little worth, when new is more preferred. One day, when as the shepherd swains together were met, to make their sports and merry glee, as they are wont in fair sunshiny weather, the whiles their flocks in shadows shrouded be, they fell to dance. Then did they all agree that Colin Clout should pipe, as one most fit, and Calidore should lead the ring, as he that most in pastorella's grace did sit. Thereat frowned Corydon, and his lip closely bit. But Calidore, of courteous inclination, took Corydon and set him in his place, that he should lead the dance, as was his fashion. For Corydon could dance, and trimly trace. And when as pastorella, him to grace, her flowery garland took from her own head and placed on his, he did it soon displace, and did it put on Corydon's instead. Then Corydon walks frolic, that erst seemed dead. Another time, when as they did dispose to practice games and masteries to try, they for their judge did Pastorella chose, a garland was the meed of victory. There Corydon, forth stepping openly, did challenge Calidore to wrestling game, for he, through long and perfect industry, therein well practised was, and in the same thought sure to venge his grudge, and work his foe great shame. But Calidore he greatly did mistake, for he was strong and mightily stiff-piped, that with one fall his neck he almost brake, and had he not upon him fallen light, his dearest joint he sure had broken quite. Then was the oaken crown by Pastorell given to Calidore as his due right, but he, that did in courtesy excel, gave it to Corydon, and said he won it well. Thus did the gentle knight himself abear amongst that rustic rout in all his deeds, that even they, the which his rivals were, could not malign him, but commend him needs. For courtesy amongst the rudest breeds goodwill and favor. So it surely wrought with this fair maid, and in her mind the seeds of perfect love did sow, that last forth brought the fruit of joy and bliss, though long time dearly bought. Thus Calidore continued there long time to win the love of the fair Pastorell, which having got, he used without crime or blameful blot, but managed so well that he of all the rest which there did dwell was favored, and to her grace commended. But what strange fortunes under him befell, ere he attained the point by him intended, shall more conveniently in other place be ended.
End of Canto 9. Recording by Thomas Copeland. Book 6, Canto 10 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund SPENSER. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 10. Calidore sees the Graces dance to Colin's melody, the whiles his Pastorell is led into captivity. Who now does follow the foul blatant beast, whilst Calidore does follow that fair maid, unmindful of his vow and high behest, which by the Faerie Queene was on him laid, that he should never leave, nor be delayed from chasing him, till he had it achieved. But now, entrapped of love, which him betrayed, he mindeth more how he may be relieved with grace from her whose love his heart hath sore ingrieved. That from henceforth he means no more to sue his former quest, so full of toil and pain. Another quest, another game in view he hath, the guerdon of his love to gain, with whom he minds for ever to remain, and set his rest amongst the rustic sort, rather than hunt still after shadows vain of courtly favor, fed with light report of every blast, and sailing always in the port. Nay, certes mote he greatly blamed be, from so high step to stoop unto so low. For who had tasted once, as oft did he, the happy peace which there doth overflow, and proved the perfect pleasures which do grow amongst poor hinds, in hills, in woods, in dales, would never more delight in painted show of such false bliss as there is set for stales, to entrap unwary fools in their eternal bales. For what hath all that goodly glorious gaze like to one sight which Calidore did view, the glance whereof their dimmed eyes would daze, that never more they should endure the shew of that sunshine that makes them look askew? Nay, aught in all that world of beauties rare, save only Gloriana's heavenly hue, to which what can compare? Can it compare? The which, as cometh now by course, I will declare. One day, as he did range the fields abroad, whilst his fair Pastorella was elsewhere, he chanced to come, far from all peoples trod, unto a place whose pleasance did appear to pass all others on the earth which were. For all that ever was by nature's skill devised to work delight was gathered there, and there by her were poured forth at fill, as if this to adorn she all the rest did pill. It was an hill placed in an open plain, that round about was bordered with a wood of matchless height, that seemed the earth to disdain, in which all trees of honor stately stood, and did all winter, as in summer, bud, spreading pavilions for the birds to bower, which in their lower branches sung aloud, and in their tops the soaring hawk did tower, sitting like king of fowls in majesty and power. And at the foot thereof a gentle flood his silver waves did softly tumble down, unmarred with ragged moss or filthy mud. Ne mote wild beasts, ne mote the ruder clown thereto approach, ne filth mote therein drown. But nymphs and fairies by the banks did sit in the wood shade, which did the waters crown, keeping all noisome things away from it, and to the waters fall, tuning their accents fit. And on the top thereof a spacious plain did spread itself, to serve to all delight, either to dance, when they to dance would fain, or else to course about their bases light. Ne aught there wanted, which for pleasure might desired be, or thence to banish bale. So pleasantly the hill with equal height did seem to overlook the lowly vale. Therefore it rightly cleeped was Mount Acidale. They say that Venus, when she did dispose herself to pleasance, used to resort unto this place, and therein to repose and rest herself, as in a gladsome port, or with the graces there to play and sport. That even her own Cytheron, though in it she used most to keep her royal court, and in her sovereign majesty to sit, she in regard hereof refused, and thought unfit. Unto this place, when as the elfin knight approached, him seemed that the merry sound of a shrill pipe he playing heard on height, and many feet fast thumping the hollow ground, that through the woods their echo did rebound. He nigher drew, to weet what mote it be. There he a troop of ladies dancing found full merrily, and making gladful glee, and in the midst a shepherd piping he did see. He durst not enter into the open green, for dread of them unwares to be descried, for breaking of their dance, if he were seen. But in the covert of the wood did bide, beholding all, yet of them unespied. There he did see that pleased much his sight, that even he himself his eyes envied, 100 naked maidens lily white, all ranged in a ring, and dancing in delight. All they without were ranged in a ring, and danced round, but in the midst of them 3 other ladies did both dance and sing, the whilst the rest them round about did hem, and like a girland did encompass stem. And in the midst of those same 3 was placed another damsel, as a precious gem amidst a ring most richly well enchased, that with her goodly presence all the rest much graced. Look how the crown which Ariadne wore upon her ivory forehead, that same day that Theseus her unto his bridal bore, when the bold centaurs made that bloody fray with the fierce Lapiths, which did them dismay, being now placed in the firmament, through the bright heaven doth her beams display, and is unto the stars an ornament, which round about her move in order excellent. Such was the beauty of this goodly band, whose sundry parts were here too long to tell. But she that in the midst of them did stand seemed all the rest in beauty to excel, crowned with a rosy girland that right well did her beseem. And ever as the crew about her danced, sweet flowers that far did smell, and fragrant odors they upon her threw. But most of all those 3 did her with gifts endue. Those were the Graces, daughters of delight, handmaids of Venus, which are wont to haunt upon this hill, and dance there day and night. Those 3 to men all gifts of grace do grant,
and all that Venus in herself doth vaunt is borrowed of them.
But that fair one that in the midst was placed paravant, was she to whom that shepherd piped alone, that made him pipe so merrily as never none. She was, to weet, that jolly shepherd's lass, which piped there unto that merry rout. That jolly shepherd which there piped was poor Colin Clout, who knows not Colin Clout. He piped apace, whilst they him danced about. Pipe, jolly shepherd, pipe thou now apace unto thy love, that made thee low to lout. Thy love is present there with thee in place, thy love is there advanced to be another grace. Much wondered Calidore at this strange sight, whose like before his eye had never seen, and standing long astonished in sprite, and rapt with pleasance, wist not what to ween, whether it were the train of beauty's queen, or nymphs, or fairies, or enchanted show, with which his eyes mote have deluded been. Therefore resolving what it was to know, out of the wood he rose, and toward them did go. But soon as he appeared to their view, they vanished all away out of his sight, and clean were gone, which way he never knew. All save the shepherd, who for fell despite of that displeasure broke his bagpipe quite, and made great moan for that unhappy turn. But Calidore, though no less sorry wight for that mishap, yet seeing him to mourn, drew near, that he the truth of all by him mote learn. And first him greeting, thus unto him spake: Hail, jolly shepherd, which thy joyous days here leadest in this goodly merry make, frequented of these gentle nymphs always, which to thee flock to hear thy lovely lays. Tell me, what mote these dainty damsels be, which here with thee do make their pleasant plays? Right happy thou that mayst them freely see. But why, when I them saw, fled they away from me? Not I so happy, answered then that swain, as thou unhappy, which them thence did chase, whom by no means thou canst recall again. For being gone, none can them bring in place, but whom they of themselves list so to grace. Right sorry I, said then Sir Calidore, that my ill fortune did them hence displace. But since things passed none may now restore, tell me, what were they all, whose lack thee grieves so sore? Though gan that shepherd thus for to dilate, then wot thou, shepherd, whatsoever thou be, that all those ladies which thou sawest late are Venus' damsels, all within her fee, but differing in honor and degree. They all are graces which on her depend, besides 1,000 more, which ready be her to adorn, whenso she forth doth wend. But these three in the midst do chief on her attend. They are the daughters of sky-ruling Jove, by him begot of fair Eurynome, the ocean's daughter, in this pleasant grove. As he this way coming from feastful glee of Thetis' wedding, with Aeacide, in summer's shade himself here rested weary. The first of them hight mild Euphrosyne, next fair Aglaia, last Thalia Mary, sweet goddesses all three, which me in mirth do cherry. These three on men all gracious gifts bestow, which deck the body or adorn the mind, to make them lovely or well favored show, as comely carriage, entertainment kind, sweet semblant, friendly offices that bind, and all the compliments of courtesy. They teach us how to each degree and kind we should ourselves demean, to low, to high, to friends, to foes, which skill men call civility. Therefore they always smoothly seem to smile, that we likewise should mild and gentle be, and also naked are, that without guile or false dissemblance all them plain may see, simple and true, from covert malice free. And eke themselves so in their dance they bore, that two of them still froward seemed to be, but one still towards showed herself afore, that good should from us go, then come in greater store. Such were those goddesses which ye did see, but that fourth maid, which there amidst them traced, who can read what creature mote she be, whether a creature or a goddess graced with heavenly gifts from heaven first enraced? But what so sure she was, she worthy was to be the fourth with those three other placed. Yet was she certes but a country lass, yet she all other country lasses far did pass, so far as doth the daughter of the day all other lesser lights in light excel. So far doth she in beautiful array above all other lasses bear the bell. Ne less in virtue that beseems her well doth she exceed the rest of all her race. For which the graces that here wont to dwell have for more honor brought her to this place, and graced her so much to be another grace. Another grace she well deserves to be, in whom so many graces gathered are, excelling much the mean of her degree. divine resemblance, beauty sovereign rare, firm chastity, that spite ne blemish dare, all which she with such courtesy doth grace, that all her peers cannot with her compare, but quite are dimmed when she is in place. She made me often pipe, and now to pipe apace. Sun of the world, great glory of the sky, that all the earth dost lighten with thy rays, great Gloriana, greatest Majesty, pardon thy shepherd, mongst so many lays as he hath sung to thee in all his days, to make one minim of thy poor handmaid, and underneath thy feet to place her praise, that when thy glory shall be far displayed to future age, of her this mention may be made. When thus that shepherd ended had his speech, said Calidore, now sure it irketh me, that to thy bliss I made this luckless breach, as now the author of thy bale to be, thus to bereave thy love's dear sight from thee. But, gentle shepherd, pardon thou my shame, who rashly sought that which I mote not see. Thus did the courteous knight excuse his blame, and to recomfort him all comely means did frame. In such discourses they together spent long time, as fit occasion forth them led, with which the knight himself did much content, and with delight his greedy fancy fed, both of his words, which he with reason read, and also of the place whose pleasures rare with such regard his senses ravished, that thence he had no will away to fare, but wished that with that shepherd he mote dwelling share. But that envenomed sting, the which of yore his poisonous point deep fixed in his heart had left, now gan afresh to rankle sore, and to renew the rigor of his smart, which to recure no skill of leech's art mote him avail, but to return again to his wound's worker, that with lovely dart dinting his breast had bred his restless pain, like as the wounded whale to shore flies from the main. So taking leave of that same gentle swain, he back returned to his rustic one, where his fair pastorella did remain, to whom, in sort as he at first begun, he daily did apply himself to done all dewful service, void of thoughts impure. Ne any pains ne peril did he shun, by which he might her to his love allure, and liking in her yet untamed heart procure. And evermore the shepherd Corydon, whatever thing he did her to agrate, did strive to match with strong contention, and all his pains did closely emulate, whether it were to carol as they sate keeping their sheep, or games to exercise, or to present her with their labors late, through which if any grace chanced to arise to him, the shepherd straight with jealousy did frise. One day, as they all three together went to the green wood to gather strawberries, there chanced to them a dangerous accident. A tiger forth out of the wood did rise, that with fell claws full of fierce gourmandize, and greedy mouth, wide gaping like hell gate, did run at Pastorelle her to surprise, whom she beholding, now all desolate, gan cry to them aloud to help her all too late. Which Corydon first hearing, ran in haste to rescue her, but when he saw the fiend, through cowherd fear he fled away as fast, ne durst abide the danger of the end. His life he esteemed dearer than his friend. But Calidore soon coming to her aid, when he the beast saw ready now to rend his love's dear spoil, in which his heart was prayed, he ran at him and raged instead of being frayed. He had no weapon but his shepherd's hook, to serve the vengeance of his wrathful will, with which so sternly he the monster strook, that to the ground astonished he fell, whence ere he could recover he did him quell, and hewing off his head, he it presented before the feet of the fair Pastorelle, who scarcely yet from former fear exempted, 1,000 times him thanked that had her death prevented. From that day forth she gan him to affect, and daily more her favor to augment, but Corydon for cowherdize reject, fit to keep sheep, unfit for love's content. The gentle heart scorns base disparagement, yet Calidore did not despise him quite, but used him friendly for further intent, that by his fellowship he colour might both his estate and love from skill of any wight. So well he wooed her, and so well he wrought her with humble service and with daily suit, that at the last unto his will he brought her, which he so wisely well did prosecute, that of his love he reaped the timely fruit, and joyed long in close felicity, till fortune, fraught with malice, blind and brute, that envies lovers' long prosperity, blew up a bitter storm of foul adversity. It fortuned one day, when Calidore was hunting in the woods, as was his trade, a lawless people, brigands hight of yore, that never used to live by plough nor spade, but fed on spoil and booty, which they made upon their neighbours which did nigh them border, the dwelling of these shepherds did invade, and spoiled their houses, and themselves did murder, and drove away their flocks, with other much disorder. Amongst the rest, the which they then did prey, they spoiled old Melody of all he had, and all his people captive led away, mongst which this luckless maid away was led, fair Pastorella, sorrowful and sad, most sorrowful, most sad that ever sight, now made the spoil of thieves and brigands bad, which was the conquest of the gentlest knight that ever lived, and the only glory of his might. With them also was taken Corydon, and carried captive by those thieves away, who in the covert of the night, that none mote them descry, nor rescue from their prey, unto their dwelling did them close convey. Their dwelling in a little island was, covered with shrubby woods, in which no way appeared for people in nor out to pass, nor any footing find for overgrown grass. For underneath the ground their way was made through hollow caves, that no man mote discover for the thick shrubs, which did them always shade from view of living wight, and covered over. But darkness dread and daily night did hover through all the inner parts wherein they dwelt, ne lighted was with window nor with lover, but with continual candlelight, which dealt a doubtful sense of things, not so well seen as felt. Hither those brigands brought their present prey, and kept them with continual watch and ward, meaning, so soon as they convenient may, for slaves to sell them, for no small reward, to merchants, which them kept in bondage hard, or sold again. Now when fair Pastorelle into this place was brought, and kept with guard of grisly thieves, she thought herself in hell, where with such damned fiends she should in darkness dwell. But for to tell the doleful dreariment and pitiful complaints which there she made, where day and night she naught did but lament her wretched life, shut up in deadly shade, and waste her goodly beauty, which did fade like to a flower that feels no heat of sun, which may her feeble leaves with comfort glade. But what befell her in that thievish one will in another canto better be begun.
End of Canto 10. Recording by Thomas Copeland. Book 6, Canto 11 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 11. The thieves fall out for Pastorelle, whilst Melody is slain. Her Calidore from them redeems, and bringeth back again. The joys of love, if they should ever last, without affliction or disquietness, that worldly chances do amongst them cast, would be on earth too great a blessedness, liker to heaven than mortal wretchedness. Therefore the winged God, to let men weet that here on earth is no sure happiness, 1,000 sours hath tempered with one sweet, to make it seem more dear and dainty, as is meet. Like as is now befallen to this fair maid, fair Pastorelle, of whom is now my song, who being now in dreadful darkness laid amongst those thieves, which her in bondage strong detained, yet fortune, not with all this wrong contented, greater mischief on her threw, and sorrows heaped on her in greater throng, that whoso hears her heaviness would rue and pity her sad plight, so changed from pleasant hue. Whilst thus she in these hellish dens remained, wrapped in wretched cares and heart's unrest, It so befell, as fortune had ordained, that he which was their captain professed, and had the chief command of all the rest, one day, as he did all his prisoners view, with lustful eyes beheld that lovely guest, fair Pastorella, whose sad mournful hue, like the fair morning clad in misty fog, did shew. At sight whereof his barbarous heart was fired, and inly burnt with flames most raging hot, that her alone he for his part desired of all the other prey which they had got, and her in mind did to himself allot. From that day forth he kindness to her showed, and sought her love by all the means he mought. With looks, with words, with gifts he oft her wooed, and mixed threats among, and much unto her vowed. But all that ever he could do or say, her constant mind could not a whit remove, nor draw unto the lure of his lewd lay, to grant him favor or afford him love. Yet ceased he not to sue, and always prove by which he mote accomplish his request, saying and doing all that mote behoove. Ne day nor night he suffered her to rest, but her all night did watch, and all the day molest. At last, when him she so importune saw, fearing lest he at length the reins should lend unto his lust, and make his will his law, sith in his power she was, to foe or friend, she thought it best, for shadow, to pretend some show of favor, by him gracing small, that she thereby mote either freely wend, or at more ease continue there his thrall. A little well is lent, that gaineth more withal. So from thenceforth, when love he to her made, with better terms she did him entertain, which gave him hope, and did him half persuade that he in time her joyance should obtain. But when she saw, through that small favors gain, that further than she willing was he pressed, she found no means to bar him, but to feign a sudden sickness, which her sore oppressed, and made unfit to serve his lawless mind's behest. By means whereof she would not him permit once to approach to her in privity, but only mongst the rest by her to sit, mourning the rigor of her malady, and seeking all things meet for remedy. But she resolved no remedy to find, nor better cheer to show in misery, till fortune would her captive bonds unbind. Her sickness was not of the body, but the mind. During which space that she thus sick did lie, it chanced a sort of merchants, which were wont to skim those coasts, for bondmen there to buy, and by such traffic after gains to hunt, arrived in this isle, though bare and blunt, t'inquire for slaves, where being ready met by some of these same thieves at the instant brunt, were brought unto their captain, who was set by his fair patient's side with sorrowful regret. To whom they showed how those merchants were arrived in place their bondslaves for to buy, and therefore prayed that those same captives there mote to them for their most commodity be sold, and mongst them share it equally. This their request the captain much appalled, yet could he not their just demand deny, and willed straight the slaves should be forthcalled, and sold for most advantage, not to be forestalled. Then forth the good old Melody was brought, and Corydon, with many other mo, whom they before in divers spoils had caught. All which he to the merchants' sale did show, till some, which did the sundry prisoners know, gan to inquire for that fair shepherdess, which with the rest they took not long ago, and gan her form and features to express, the more to augment her price through praise of comeliness. To whom the captain in full angry wise made answer, that the maid of whom they spake was his own purchase and his only prize, with which none had to do, ne aught partake but he himself, which did that conquest make. Little for him to have one silly lass, besides through sickness now so wan and weak, that nothing meet in merchandise to pass. So showed them her, to prove how pale and weak she was, the sight of whom, though now decayed and marred, and eke but hardly seen by candlelight, yet like a diamond of rich regard, in doubtful shadow of the darksome night, with starry beams about her shining bright, these merchants' fixed eyes did so amaze, that what through wonder and what through delight, A while on her they greedily did gaze, and did her greatly like, and did her greatly praise. At last, when all the rest them offered were, and prizes to them placed at their pleasure, they all refused in regard of her, ne aught would buy, however prized with measure, withouten her, whose worth above all treasure they did esteem, and offered store of gold. But then the captain, fraught with more displeasure, bade them be still, his love should not be sold, the rest take if they would, he her to him would hold. Therewith some other of the chiefest thieves boldly him bade such injury forbear, for that same maid, however it him grieves, should with the rest be sold before him there, to make the prizes of the rest more dear. That with great rage he stoutly doth deny, and fiercely drawing forth his blade, doth swear that who so hardy hand on her doth lay, it dearly shall abye, and death for handsel pay. Thus as they words amongst them multiply, they fall to strokes, the fruit of too much talk, and the mad steel about doth fiercely fly, not sparing wight, ne leaving any balk, but making way for death at large to walk, who in the horror of the grisly night, in thousand dreadful shapes doth mongst them stalk, and makes huge havoc, whilst the candle light, outquenched, leaves no skill nor difference of wight. Like as a sort of hungry dogs, ymet about some carcass by the common way, do fall together, striving each to get the greatest portion of the greedy prey, all on confused heaps themselves assay, and snatch and bite and rend and tug and tear, that who them sees would wonder at their fray, and who sees not would be afraid to hear. Such was the conflict of those cruel brigands there. But first of all their captives they do kill, lest they should join against the weaker side, or rise against the remnant at their will. Old Meleby is slain, and him beside his aged wife, with many others wide. But Corydon escaping craftily, creeps forth of doors, whilst darkness him doth hide, and flies away as fast as he can hie, ne stayeth leave to take before his friends do die. But Pastorella, woeful wretched elf, was by the captain all this while defended, who minding more her safety than himself, his target always over her pretended, by means whereof, that mote not be amended, he at the length was slain, and laid on ground, yet holding fast twixt both his arms extended fair Pastorelle, who with the self same wound launched through the arm, fell down with him in dreary swound. There lay she covered with confused press of carcasses, which dying on her fell, though when as he was dead the fray gan cease, and each to other calling did compel to stay their cruel hands from slaughter fell, sith they that were the cause of all were gone. Thereto they all at once agreed well, and lighting candles new, gan search anon how many of their friends were slain, how many foen. Their captain there they cruelly found killed, and in his arms the dreary dying maid, like a sweet angel twixt two clouds uphilled. Her lovely light was dimmed and decayed, with cloud of death upon her eyes displayed. Yet did the cloud make even that dimmed light seem much more lovely in that darkness laid, and twixt the twinkling of her eyelids bright, to spark out little beams like stars in foggy night. But when they moved the carcasses aside, they found that life did yet in her remain. Then all their helps they busily applied, to call the soul back to her home again, and wrought so well with labor and long pain, that they to life recovered her at last, who sighing sore, as if her heart in twain had riven been, and all her heartstrings brast, with dreary drooping eyne looked up like one aghast. There she beheld, that sore her grieved to see, her father and her friends about her lying, herself sole left, a second spoil to be of those that, having saved her from dying, renewed her death by timely death denying. What now is left her but to wail and weep, wringing her hands and ruefully loud crying, ne cared she her wound in tears to steep, albe with all their might those brigands did her keep. But when they saw her now relived again, They left her so in charge of one, the best of many worst, who with unkind disdain and cruel rigor her did much molest, scarce yielding her due food or timely rest, and scarcely suffering her infestered wound, that sore her pained, by any to be dressed. So leave we her in wretched thraldom bound, and turn we back to Calidore, where we him found. Who, when he back returned from the wood, and saw his shepherd's cottage spoiled quite, and his love reft away, he wexed wood, and half enraged at that rueful sight, that even his heart for very fell despite, and his own flesh he ready was to tear. He chafed, he grieved, he fretted, and he sight, and fared like a furious wild bear, whose whelps are stolen away, she being otherwhere. Ne wight he found to whom he might complain, ne wight he found of whom he might inquire, that more increased the anguish of his pain. He sought the woods, but no man could see there. He sought the plains, but could no tidings hear. The woods did not but echoes vain rebound, the plains all waste and empty did appear. Where wont the shepherds oft their pipes resound, and feed 100 flocks, there now not one he found. At last, as there he roamed up and down, he chanced one coming towards him to spy, that seemed to be some sorry simple clown, with ragged weeds and locks upstaring high, as if he did from some late danger fly, and yet his fear did follow him behind. Who, as he unto him approached nigh, he mote perceive by signs which he did find, that Corydon it was, the silly shepherd's hind. Though to him running fast, he did not stay to greet him first, but asked, where were the rest, where Pastorell, who, full of fresh dismay, and gushing forth in tears, was so oppressed, that he no word could speak, but smit his breast, and up to heaven his eyes fast streaming threw. Whereat the knight amazed, yet did not rest, but asked again, what meant that rueful hue? Where was his Pastorell? Where all the other crew? Ah, well away, said he, then sighing sore, that ever I did live this day to see, this dismal day, and was not dead before I saw fair Pastorella die. Die? Out, alas! Then Calidore did cry, how could the death dare ever her to quell? But read, thou shepherd, read what destiny, or other direful hap from heaven or hell, hath wrought this wicked deed. Do fear away, and tell. Though when the shepherd breathed had a while, he thus began, where shall I then commence this woeful tale? Or how those brigands vile, with cruel rage and dreadful violence, spoiled all our cots, and carried us from hence? Or how fair Pastorell should have been sold to marchants, but was saved with strong defence? Or how those thieves, whilst one sought her to hold, fell all at odds, and fought through fury fierce and bold? In that same conflict, woe is me, befell this fatal chance, this doleful accident, whose heavy tidings now I have to tell. First, all the captives which they here had hent were by them slain by general consent. Old Melibee and his good wife withal these eyes saw die, and dearly did lament. But when the lot to Pastorell did fall, their captain long withstood, and did her death forestall. But what could he gainst all them do alone? It could not boot, needs mote she die at last. I only scaped through great confusion of cries and clamors, which amongst them passed in dreadful darkness, dreadfully aghast. That better were with them to have been dead, than here to see all desolate and waste, despoiled of those joys and jollyhead, which with those gentle shepherds here I want to lead. When Calidore these rueful news had wrought, his heart quite deaded was with anguish great, and all his wits with dule were nigh distraught, that he his face, his head, his breast did beat, and death itself unto himself did threat, oft cursing the heavens, that so cruel were to her whose name he often did repeat, and wishing oft that he were present there when she was slain, or had been to her succor near. But after grief a while had had his course, and spent itself in mourning, he at last began to mitigate his swelling source, and in his mind with better reason cast, how he might save her life, if life did last, or if that dead, how he her death might wreak, sith otherwise he could not mend thing past. Or if it to revenge he were too weak, then for to die with her, and his lives threed to break. Though Corydon he prayed, sith he well knew the ready way unto that thievish one, to wend with him, and be his conduct true unto the place, to see what should be done. But he, whose heart through fear was late fordone, would not for aught be drawn to former dreed, but by all means the danger known did shun. Yet Calidore so well him wrought with meed, and fair bespoke with words, that he at last agreed. So forth they go together, God before, both clad in shepherd's weeds agreeably, and both with shepherd's hooks, but Calidore had underneath him armed privily. Though to the place when they approached nigh, they chanced upon an hill not far away some flocks of sheep and shepherds to espy, to whom they both agreed to take their way, in hope their news to learn, how they mote best assay. There did they find, that which they did not fear, the self-same flocks, the which those thieves had reft from Melibee, and from themselves whileare, and certain of the thieves there by them left, the which for want of herds themselves then kept. Right well knew Corydon his own late sheep, and seeing them for tender pity wept. But when he saw the thieves which did them keep, his heart gan fail, albeit he saw them all asleep. But Calidore, recomforting his grief, though not his fear, for naught may fear dissuade, him hardly forward drew, whereas the thief lay sleeping soundly in the bushes' shade. Whom Corydon him counselled to invade, now all unwares, and take the spoil away. But he that in his mind had closely made a further purpose, would not so them slay, but gently waking them, gave them the time of day. Though sitting down by them upon the green, of sundry things he purpose gan to feign, that he by them might certain tidings ween of Pastorell, were she alive or slain. Mongst which the thieves them questioned again, what Mr. men, and eke from whence they were. To whom they answered, as did appertain, that they were poor herd grooms, the which whileare had from their maisters fled, and now sought hire elsewhere. Whereof right glad they seemed, and offer made to hire them well, if they their flocks would keep. For they themselves were evil grooms, they said, unwont with herds to watch, or pasture sheep, but to foray the land, or scour the deep. Thereto they soon agreed, and earnest took, to keep their flocks for little hire and cheap. For they for better hire did shortly look. So there all day they bode, till light the sky forsook. Though when as towards darksome night it drew, unto their hellish dens those thieves them brought, where shortly they in great acquaintance grew, and all the secrets of their entrails sought. There did they find, contrary to their thought, that Pastorell yet lived, but all the rest were dead, right so as Corydon had taught, whereof they both full glad and blithe did rest, but chiefly Calidore, whom grief had most possessed. At length, when they occasion fittest found, in dead of night, when all the thieves did rest, after a late foray, and slept full sound, Sir Calidore him armed as he thought best, having of late by diligent inquest provided him a sword of meanest sort, with which he straight went to the captain's nest. But Corydon durst not with him consort, ne durst abide behind, for dread of worse effort. When to the cave they came, they found it fast, but Calidore with huge resistless might the doors assailed, and the locks upbrast. With noise whereof the thief awaking light, unto the entrance ran, where the bold knight encountering him with small resistance slew. The whiles fair Pastorell through great affright was almost dead, misdoubting lest of new some uproar were, like that which lately she did view. But when as Calidore was comen in, and gan aloud for Pastorell to call, knowing his voice, although not heard long sin, she sudden was revived therewithal, and wondrous joy felt in her spirit's thrall. like him that, being long in tempest tossed, looking each hour into death's mouth to fall, at length espies at hand the happy coast, on which he safety hopes, that erst feared to be lost. Her gentle heart, that now long season past had never joyance felt, nor cheerful thought, began some smack of comfort new to taste, like lifeful heat to numbed senses brought, and life to feel that long for death had sought. Ne less in heart rejoiced Calidore, when he her found, but, like to one distraught and robbed of reason, towards her him bore, 1,000 times embraced, and kissed 1,000 more. But now by this, with noise of late uproar, the hue and cry was raised all about, and all the brigands, flocking in great store, unto the cave gan press, not having doubt of that was done, and entered in a rout. But Calidore in th'entry close did stand, and entertaining them with courage stout, still slew the foremost that came first to hand, so long till all the entry was with bodies manned. Though when no more could nigh to him approach, he breathed his sword, and rested him till day, which when he spied upon the earth t'encroach, through the dead carcasses he made his way, mongst which he found a sword of better say, with which he forth went into th' open light, where all the rest for him did ready stay, and fierce assailing him, with all their might gan all upon him lay. There gan a dreadful fight. How many flies in hottest summer day do seize upon some beast whose flesh is bare, that all the place with swarms do overlay, and with their little stings right felly fare, so many thieves about him swarming are, all which to him assail on every side, and sore oppress, ne any him doth spare, but he doth with his raging brawns divide their thickest troops, and round about him scattereth wide. Like as a lion mongst an herd of deer disperseth them to catch his choicest prey, so did he fly amongst them here and there, and all that near him came did hew and slay, till he had strode with bodies all the way, that none his danger daring to abide, fled from his wrath, and did themselves convey into their caves, their heads from death to hide, ne any left that victory to him envied. Then back returning to his dearest dear, he her gan to recomfort all he might, with gladful speeches and with lovely cheer, and forth her bringing to the joyous light, whereof she long had lacked the wishful sight, devised all goodly means from her to drive the sad resemblance of her wretched plight. So her uneath at last he did revive, that long had lien dead, and made again alive. This done, into those thievish dens he went, and thence did all the spoils and treasures take, which they from many long had robbed and rent. But fortune now the victor's meed did make, of which the best he did his love betake, and also all those flocks which they before had reft from Melibee and from his make, he did them all to Corydon restore, so drove them all away, and his love with him bore.
End of Canto 11. Recording by Thomas Copeland. Book 6, Canto 12 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 12. Fair Pastorella by great hap her parents understands. Calidore doth the blatant beast subdue, and bind in bands. Like as a ship that through the ocean wide directs her course unto one certain coast, is met of many a counter wind and tide, with which her winged speed is let and crossed, and she herself in stormy surges tossed, yet making many a board and many a bay, still winneth way, ne hath her compass lost. Right so it fares with me in this long way, whose course is often stayed, yet never is astray. For all that hitherto hath long delayed this gentle knight from suing his first quest, though out of course, yet hath not been missayed, to show the courtesy by him professed, even unto the lowest and the least. But now I come into my course again, to his achievement of the blatant beast, who all this while at will did range and reign, whilst none was him to stop, nor none him to restrain. Sir Calidore, when thus he now had wrought fair Pastorella from those brigands' power, unto the castle of Belgard her brought, whereof was lord the good Sir Bellamawr, who whilom was in his youth's freshest flower a lusty knight as ever wielded spear, and had endured many a dreadful stour in bloody battle for a lady dear, the fairest lady then of all that living were. Her name was Claribel, whose father hight the lord of many islands, far renowned for his great riches and his greater might. He through the wealth wherein he did abound, this daughter thought in wedlock to have bound unto the prince of Pictland bordering near. But she, whose sides before with secret wound of love to Bellamawr empierced were, by all means shunned to match with any foreign fear. And Bellamawr again so well her pleased, with daily service and attendance due, that of her love he was entirely seized, and closely did her wed, but known to few. Which when her father understood, he grew in so great rage, that them in dungeon deep without compassion cruelly he threw, yet did so straitly them asunder keep, that neither could to company of th'other creep. Natheless Sir Bellamawr, whether through grace or secret gifts, so with his keepers wrought, that to his love sometimes he came in place, whereof her womb unwist to white was fraught, and in due time a maiden child forth brought, which she straightway, for dread lest if her sire should know thereof, to slay he would have sought, delivered to her handmaid, that for hire she should at cause be fostered under strange attire. The trusty damsel, bearing it abroad into the empty fields, where living wight mote not bewray the secret of her load, she forth gan lay unto the open light the little babe to take thereof a sight, whom whilst she did with watery eyne behold, upon the little breast, like crystal bright, she mote perceive a little purple mold, that like a rose her silken leaves did fair unfold. Well she had marked, and pitied the more, yet could not remedy her wretched case, but closing it again like as before, bedewed with tears, there left it in the place. Yet left not quite, but drew a little space behind the bushes, where she did her hide, to weet what mortal hand, or heaven's grace, would for the wretched infant's help provide, for which it loudly called and pitifully cried. At length a shepherd, which thereby did keep his fleecy flock upon the plains around, led with the infant's cry, that loud did weep, came to the place, where when he rapid found the abandoned spoil, he softly it unbound, and seeing there that did him pity sore, he took it up, and in his mantle wound. So home unto his honest wife it bore, who as her own it nursed, and named evermore. Thus long continued Claribel a thrall, and Bellamawr in bands, till that her sire departed life, and left unto them all. Then all the storms of fortune's former ire were turned, and they to freedom did retire. Thenceforth they joyed in happiness together, and lived long in peace and love entire, without disquiet or dislike of either, till time that Calidore brought Pastorella thither. Both whom they goodly well did entertain, for Bellamawr knew Calidore right well, and loved for his prowess, sith they twain long since had fought in field. All's Claribel no less did tender the fair Pastorelle, seeing her weak and wan through durance long. There they a while together thus did dwell in much delight, and many joys among, until the damsel gan to wex more sound and strong. Though gan Sir Calidore him to advise of his first quest, which he had long forlore, ashamed to think how he that enterprise, the which the Faerie Queene had long afore bequeathed to him, forslacked had so sore, that much he feared lest reproachful blame with foul dishonor him mote blot therefore, besides the loss of so much lose and fame, as through the world thereby should glorify his name. Therefore resolving to return in haste unto so great achievement, He bethought to leave his love, now peril being past, with Claribel, whilst he that monster sought throughout the world, and to destruction brought. So taking leave of his fair pastoral, whom to recomfort all the means he wrought, with thanks to Bellamour and Claribel, he went forth on his quest, and did that him befell. But first, ere I do his adventures tell in this exploit, me needeth to declare what did betide to the fair pastoral during his absence left in heavy care, through daily mourning and nightly misfare. Yet did that ancient matron all she might to cherish her with all things choice and rare, and her own handmaid, that Melissa hight, appointed to attend her duly day and night, who in a morning, when this maiden fair was dighting her, having her snowy breast as yet not laced, nor her golden hair into their comely tresses duly dressed, chanced to espy upon her ivory chest the rosy mark, which she remembered well that little infant had, which forth she kest, the daughter of her lady Claribel, the which she bore the whiles in prison she did dwell. Which well avising, straight she gan to cast in her conceitful mind, that this fair maid was that same infant, which so long sith past she in the open fields had loosely laid to fortune's spoil, unable it to aid. So full of joy, straight forth she ran in haste unto her mistress, being half dismayed, to tell her how the heavens had her graced, to save her child, which in misfortune's mouth was placed. The sober mother, seeing such her mood, yet knowing not what meant that sudden throw, asked her how mote her words be understood, and what the matter was that moved her so. My lief, said she, ye know that long ago, whilst ye in durance dwelt, ye to me gave a little maid, the which ye childed though. The same again, if now ye list to have, the same is yonder lady, whom high God did save. Much was the lady troubled at that speech, and gan to question straight how she it knew. Most certain marks, said she, do me it teach, for on her breast I with these eyes did view the little purple rose which thereon grew, whereof her name he then to her did give. Besides her countenance and her likely hue, matched with equal years, do surely prove that yon same is your daughter sure, which yet doth live. The matron stayed no longer to inquire, but forth in haste ran to the stranger maid, whom catching greedily for great desire, rent up her breast and bosom open laid, in which that rose she plainly saw displayed. Then her embracing twixt her armes twain, she long so held, and softly weeping said, And livest thou, my daughter, now again? And art thou yet alive, whom dead I long did feign? Though further asking her of sundry things, and times comparing with their accidents, she found at last, by very certain signs, and speaking marks of passed monuments, that this young maid, whom chance to her presents, is her own daughter, her own infant dear. Though, wondering long at those so strange events, 1,000 times she her embraced near, with many a joyful kiss, and many a melting tear. Whoever is the mother of one child, which having thought long dead she finds alive, let her by proof of that which she hath filed in her own breast, this mother's joy describe. For other none such passion can contrive in perfect form, as this good lady felt, when she so fair a daughter saw survive, as Pastorella was, that nigh she swelt for passing joy, which did all into pity melt. Thence running forth unto her loved lord, she unto him recounted all that fell, who joining joy with her in one accord, acknowledged for his own fair pastoral. There leave we them in joy, and let us tell of Calidore, who seeking all this while that monstrous beast, by final force to quell, through every place, with restless pain and toil, him followed by the tract of his outrageous spoil. Through all estates he found that he had passed, in which he many massacres had left, and to the clergy now was come at last, in which such spoil, such havoc, and such theft he wrought, that thence all goodness he bereft, that endless were to tell. The elfin knight, who now no place besides unsought had left, at length into a monaster did light, where he him found despoiling all with main and might. Into their cloisters now he broken had, through which the monks he chased here and there, and them pursued into their daughters sad, and searched all their cells and secrets near, in which what filth and ordure did appear were yerksome to report. Yet that foul beast, not sparing them, the more did toss and tear, and ransack all their dens, from most to least, regarding not religion nor their holy heast. From thence into the sacred church he broke, and robbed the chancel, and the desks down threw, and altars fouled, and blasphemy spoke, and images, for all their goodly hue, did cast to ground, whilst none was them to rue. So all confounded and disordered there. But seeing Calidore, away he flew, knowing his fatal hand by former fear. But he, him fast pursuing, soon approached near.
Him in a narrow place he overtook,
And fierce assailing, forced him turn again. Sternly he turned again, when he him strook with his sharp steel, and ran at him amain with open mouth, that seemed to contain a full good peck within the utmost brim, all set with iron teeth in ranges twain, that terrified his foes, and armed him, appearing like the mouth of Orcus, grisly grim. And therein were 1,000 tongues empite of sundry kinds, and sundry quality. Some were of dogs that barked day and night, and some of cats that rawling still did cry, and some of bears that groined continually, and some of tigers that did seem to gren and snarl at all that ever passed by. But most of them were tongues of mortal men, which spake reproachfully, not caring where nor when. And them amongst were mingled here and there the tongues of serpents, with 3-forked stings, that spat out poison and gore bloody gear at all that came within his ravenings, and spake licentious words and hateful things of good and bad alike, of low and high. Ne Caesars spared he a whit, nor kings, but either blotted them with infamy, or bit them with his baneful teeth of injury. But Calidore, thereof no whit afraid, rencountered him with so impetuous might, that the outrage of his violence he stayed, and bet aback, threatening in vain to bite, and spitting forth the poison of his spite, that foamed all about his bloody jaws. Though rearing up his former feet on height, he ramped upon him with his ravenous paws, as if he would have rent him with his cruel claws. But he, right well aware his rage to ward, did cast his shield atween, and therewithal, putting his puissance forth, pursued so hard, that backward he enforced him to fall, and being down, ere he new help could call, his shield he on him threw, and fast down held, like as a bullock that in bloody stall of butcher's baleful hand to ground is felled, is forcibly kept down, till he be throughly quelled. Full cruelly the beast did rage and roar, to be down held, and mastered so with might, that he gan fret and foam out bloody gore, striving in vain to rear himself upright. For still the more he strove, the more the knight did him suppress and forcibly subdue. That made him almost mad for fell despite. He grinned, he bit, he scratched, he venom threw, and fared like a fiend right horrible in hue. Or like the hell-born Hydra, which they feign that great Alcides whilome overthrew, after that he had labored long in vain to crop his 1,000 heads, the which still new forth budded, and in greater number grew. Such was the fury of this hellish beast, whilst Calidore him under him down threw, who now the more his heavy load released, but the more he raged, the more his power increased. Though when the beast saw he mote not avail by force, he gan his 100 tongues apply, and sharply at him to revile and rail, with bitter terms of shameful infamy, oft interlacing many a forged lie, whose like he never once did speak nor hear, nor ever thought things so unworthily. Yet did he not for all that him forbear, but strained him so straitly that he choked him near. At last, when as he found his force to shrink and rage to quail, he took a muzzle strong of surest iron made with many a link. Therewith he mured up his mouth along, and therein shut up his blasphemous tongue, for never more defaming gentle knight, or unto lovely lady doing wrong. And thereunto a great long chain he tight, with which he drew him forth, even in his own despite. Like as whilome that strong Terinthian swain brought forth with him the dreadful dog of hell, against his will fast bound in iron chain, and roaring horribly, did him compel to see the hateful sun, that he might tell to grisly Pluto what on earth was done, and to the other damned ghosts which dwell for aye in darkness, which daylight doth shun. So led this knight his captive, with like conquest won. Yet greatly did the beast repine at those strange bands, whose like till then he never bore, ne ever any durst till then impose, and chafed inly, seeing now no more him liberty was left allowed to roar. Yet durst he not draw back, nor once withstand the proved power of noble Calidore, but trembled underneath his mighty hand, and like a fearful dog him followed through the land. Him through all fairyland he followed so, as if he learned had obedience long, that all the people, whereso he did go, out of their towns did round about him throng, to see him lead that beast in bondage strong, and seeing it much wondered at the sight. And all such persons as he erst did wrong, rejoiced much to see his captive plight, and much admired the beast, but more admired the knight. Thus was this monster by the maestering might of doughty Calidore suppressed and tamed, that never more he mote endamage wight with his vile tongue, which many had defamed, and many causeless caused to be blamed. So did he eke long after this remain, until that, whether wicked fate so framed, or fault of men, he broke his iron chain, and got into the world at liberty again. Thenceforth more mischief and more scath he wrought to mortal men than he had done before, ne ever could by any more be brought into like bands, ne mastered any more. Albe that long time after Calidore the good Sir Pelleas him took in hand, and after him Sir Lamorak of yore, and all his brethren born in Britain land. Yet none of them could ever bring him into band. So now he rangeth through the world again, and rageth sore in each degree and state. Ne any is that may him now restrain, he growen is so great and strong of late, barking and biting all that him do bate, albe they worthy blame, or clear of crime. Ne spareth he most learned wits to rate, ne spareth he the gentle poet's rhyme, but rends without regard of person or of time. Ne may this homely verse, of many meanest, hope to escape his venomous despite, more than my former writs, all were they cleanest from blameful blot, and free from all that white, with which some wicked tongues did it backbite, and bring into a mighty peer's displeasure, that never so deserved to indict. Therefore do you, my rhymes, keep better measure, and seek to please that now is counted wise men's treasure.
End of Canto 12. Recording by Thomas Copeland. End of Book 6, Canto 12 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book 7, Canto 6 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
2 cantos of mutability, which for form and matter appear to be parcel of some following book of the Faerie Queene, under the legend of Constancy, never before imprinted. Canto 6. Proud change, not pleased in mortal things beneath the moon to reign, pretends as well of gods as men to be the sovereign. What man that sees the ever whirling wheel of change, the which all mortal things doth sway, but that thereby doth find and plainly feel how mutability in them doth play her cruel sports to many men's decay, which that to all may better yet appear, I will rehearse that whilome I heard say, how she at first herself began to rear against all the gods, and th' empire sought from them to bear. But first here falleth fittest to unfold her antique race and lineage ancient, as I have found it registered of old in fairyland mongst records permanent. She was, to weet, a daughter by descent of those old Titans, that did whilome strive with Saturn's son for heaven's regiment, whom though high Jove of kingdom did deprive, yet many of their stem long after did survive. And many of them afterwards obtained great power of Jove and high authority, as Hecate, in whose almighty hand he placed all rule and principality, to be by her disposed diversely, to gods and men, as she them list divide, and dread Bellona, that doth sound on high wars and alarums unto nations wide, that makes both heaven and earth to tremble at her pride. So likewise did this Titaness aspire, rule and dominion to herself to gain, that as a goddess men might her admire, and heavenly honors yield as to them twain. At first on earth she sought it to obtain, where she such proof and sad examples shewed of her great power, to many one's great pain, that not men only whom she soon subdued, but eke all other creatures her bad doings rued. For she the face of earthly things so changed, that all which nature had established first in good estate, and in meet order ranged, she did pervert, and all their statutes burst, and all the world's fair frame, which none yet durst of gods or men to alter or misguide, she altered quite, and made them all accursed that God had blessed, and did at first provide in that still happy state for ever to abide. Ne she the laws of nature only break, but eke of justice and of policy, and wrong of right, and bad of good did make, and death for life exchanged foolishly, since which all living wights have learned to die, and all this world is waxen daily worse. O piteous work of mutability, by which we all are subject to that curse, and death instead of life have sucked from our nurse. And now when all the earth she thus had brought to her behest, and thralled to her might, she gan to cast in her ambitious thought, to tempt the empire of the heavens' height, and Jove himself to shoulder from his right. And first she passed the region of the air and of the fire, whose substance thin and slight made no resistance, ne could her contraire, but ready passage to her pleasure did prepare. Thence to the circle of the moon she came, where Cynthia reigns in everlasting glory, to whose bright shining palace straight she came, all fairly decked with heaven's goodly story, whose silver gates, by which there sate an hoary old aged sire, with hourglass in hand hight time, she entered, were he lief or sorry, ne stayed till she the highest stage had scanned, where Cynthia did sit that never still did stand. Her sitting on an ivory throne she found, drawn of two steeds, one black, the other white, environed with 10,000 stars around, that duly her attended day and night. And by her side there ran her page, that hight Vesper, whom we the evening star intend, that with his torch, still twinkling like twilight, her lightened all the way where she should wend, and joy to weary wandering travellers did lend. That when the hardy Titaness beheld the goodly building of her palace bright, made of the heaven substance, and upheld with 1,000 crystal pillars of huge height, she gan to burn in her ambitious sprite, and envy her that in such glory reigned. Eftsoons she cast by force and tortious might her to displace, and to herself to have gained the kingdom of the night, and waters by her waned. Boldly she bid the goddess down descend, and let herself into that ivory throne, for she herself more worthy thereof wend, and better able it to guide alone, whether to men, whose fall she did bemoan, or unto gods, whose state she did malign, or to the infernal powers, her need give loan of her fair light and bounty most benign, herself of all that rule she deemed most condign. But she that had to her that sovereign seat by highest Jove assigned, therein to bear night's burning lamp, regarded not her threat, ne yielded aught for favor or for fear, but with stern countenance and disdainful cheer, bending her horned brows, did put her back, and boldly blaming her for coming there, bade her at once from heaven's coast to pack, or at her peril bide the wrathful thunder's rack. Yet gnaw the more the giantess forbear, but boldly pressing on, wrought forth her hand to pluck her down perforce from off her chair, and therewith lifting up her golden wand, threatened to strike her if she did withstand. Whereat the stars, which round about her blazed, and eke the moon's bright wagon, still did stand, all being with so bold attempt amazed, and on her uncouth habit and stern look still gazed. Meanwhile the lower world, which nothing knew of all that chanced here, was darkened quite, and eke the heavens and all the heavenly crew of happy wights, now unpurveyed of light, were much afraid, and wondered at that sight, fearing lest chaos broken had his chain, and brought again on them eternal night. But chiefly Mercury, that next doth reign, ran forth in haste unto the King of gods to plain. All ran together with a great outcry to Jove's fair palace fixed in heaven's height, and beating at his gates full earnestly, gan call to him aloud with all their might, to know what meant that sudden lack of light. The father of the gods, when this he heard, was troubled much at their so strange affright, doubting lest Typhon were again upreared, or other his old foes that once him sorely feared. Eftsoons the son of Maia forth he sent down to the circle of the moon, to know the cause of this so strange astonishment, and why she did her wonted course forslow, and if that any were on earth below, that did with charms or magic her molest, him to attach, and down to hell to throw. But if from heaven it were, then to arrest the author, and him bring before his presence pressed. The wing-foot god so fast his plumes did beat, that soon he came whereas the Titaness was striving with fair Cynthia for her seat, at whose strange sight and haughty hardiness he wondered much, and feared her no less. Yet laying fear aside to do his charge, at last he bade her, with bold steadfastness, cease to molest the moon to walk at large, or come before high Jove her doings to discharge. And therewithal he on her shoulder laid his snaky wreathed mace, whose awful power doth make both gods and hellish fiends afraid. Whereat the Titaness did sternly lour, and stoutly answered, that in evil hour he from his Jove such message to her brought, to bid her leave fair Cynthia's silver bower, sith she his Jove and him esteemed not, no more than Cynthia's self, but all their kingdom sought. The heaven's heralds stayed not to reply, but passed away his doings to relate unto his lord, who now in the highest sky was placed in his principal estate, with all the gods about him congregate, to whom when Hermes had his message told, it did them all exceedingly amate, save Jove, who, changing not his countenance bold, did unto them at length these speeches wise unfold. Hearken to me a while, ye heavenly powers. Ye may remember since the earth's cursed seed sought to assail the heaven's eternal towers, and to us all exceeding fear did breed. But how we then defeated all their deed, ye all do know, and them destroyed quite. Yet not so quite, but that there did succeed an offspring of their blood, which did alight upon the fruitful earth, which doth us yet despite. Of that bad seed is this bold woman bred, that now with bold presumption doth aspire to thrust fair Phoebe from her silver bed, and eke ourselves from heaven's high empire, if that her might were matched to her desire. Wherefore it now behooves us to advise what way is best to drive her to retire, whether by open force or counsel wise. Areed, ye sons of God, as best ye can devise. So having said, he ceased, and with his brow, his black eyebrow, whose doomful dreaded beck is wont to wield the world unto his vow, and even the highest powers of heaven to check, made sign to them in their degrees to speak, who straight gan cast their counsel grave and wise. Meanwhile the earth's daughter, though she not did reck of Hermes' message, yet gan now advise what course were best to take in this hot bold emprise. Eftsoons she thus resolved, that whilst the gods, after return of Hermes' embassy, were troubled, and amongst themselves at odds, before they could new counsels really, to set upon them in that ecstasy, and take what fortune, time, and place would lend. So forth she rose, and through the purest sky to Jove's high palace straight cast to ascend, to prosecute her plot. Good onset bodes good end. She there arriving, boldly in did pass, where all the gods she found in council close, all quite unarmed, as then their manner was. At sight of her they sudden all arose in great amaze, ne wist what way to chose. But Jove, all fearless, forced them to abide, and in his sovereign throne gan straight dispose himself, more full of grace and majesty, that mote encheer his friends, and foes mote terrify. That when the haughty Titaness beheld, all were she fraught with pride and impudence, yet with the sight thereof was almost quelled, and inly quaking, seemed as reft of sense and void of speech in that dread audience, until that Jove himself herself bespake. Speak, thou frail woman, speak with confidence. Whence art thou, and what dost thou here now make? What idle errand hast thou earth's mansion to forsake? She, half confused with his great command, yet gathering spirit of her nature's pride, him boldly answered thus to his demand: I am a daughter by the mother's side of her that is grandmother magnified of all the gods, great earth, great chaos child. But by the father's, be it not envied, I greater am in blood, whereon I build, than all the gods, though wrongfully from heaven exiled. For Titan, as ye all acknowledge must, was Saturn's elder brother by birthright, both sons of Uranus, but by unjust and guileful means, through Corybantes' slight, the younger thrust the elder from his right. Since which thou, Jove, injuriously hast held the heavens' rule from Titan's sons by might, and them to hellish dungeons down hast felled. Witness, ye heavens, the truth of all that I have telled. Whilst she thus spake, the gods that gave good ear to her bold words, and marked well her grace, being of stature tall as any there of all the gods, and beautiful of face as any of the goddesses in place, stood all astonied, like a sort of steers, mongst whom some beast of strange and foreign race unwares is chanced, far straying from his peers. So did their ghastly gaze bewray their hidden fears. Till having paused a while, Jove thus bespake: Will never mortal thoughts cease to aspire, in this bold sort to heaven claim to make, and touch celestial seats with earthly mire? I would have thought that bold Procrustes' hire, or Typhon's fall, or proud Ixion's pain, or great Prometheus tasting of our ire, would have sufficed the rest for to restrain, and warned all men by their example to refrain. But now this offscum of that cursed fry dare to renew the like bold enterprise, and challenge the heritage of this our sky, whom what should hinder, but that we likewise should handle as the rest of her allies, and thunder drive to hell? With that he shook his nectar-dewed locks, with which the skies and all the world beneath for terror quook, and eft his burning levin brand in hand he took. But when he looked on her lovely face, in which fair beams of beauty did appear, that could the greatest wrath soon turn to grace, such sway doth beauty even in heaven bear, he stayed his hand, and having changed his cheer, he thus again in milder wise began: But if God should strive with fresh fear, then shortly should the progeny of man be rooted out, if Jove should do still what he can. But thee, fair Titan's child, I rather ween, through some vain error or inducement light, to see that mortal eyes have never seen, or through ensample of thy sister's might, Bellona, whose great glory thou dost spite, since thou hast seen her dreadful power below, mongst wretched men, dismayed with her affright, to bandy crowns and kingdoms to bestow, and sure thy worth no less than hers doth seem to show. But what thou this, thou hardy Titaness, that not the worth of any living wight may challenge aught in heaven's interest, much less the title of old Titan's right? For we by conquest of our sovereign might, and by eternal doom of fate's decree, have won the empire of the heavens bright, which to ourselves we hold, and to whom we shall worthy deem partakers of our bliss to be. Then cease thy idle claim, thou foolish girl, and seek by grace and goodness to obtain that place from which by folly Titan fell. Thereto thou mayst perhaps, if so thou fain, have Jove thy gracious lord and sovereign. So having said, she thus to him replied, Cease, Saturn's son, to seek by proffers vain of idle hopes to lure me to thy side, for to betray my right before I have it tried. But thee, O Jove, no equal judge I deem of my desert, or of my dewful right, that in thine own behalf mayst partial seem. But to the highest him that is behight Father of gods and men by equal might, to weet the God of nature, I appeal. Thereat Jove waxed wroth, and in his sprite did inly grudge, yet did it well conceal, and bade Dan Phoebus scribe her appellation seal. Eftsoons the time and place appointed were, where all, both heavenly powers and earthly wights, before great nature's presence should appear, for trial of their titles and best rights. That was to weet upon the highest heights of Arlo hill. Who knows not Arlo hill? That is the highest head in all men's sights of my old father Mole, whom shepherds quill renowned hath with hymns fit for a rural skill. And were it not ill fitting for this file to sing of hills and woods mongst wars and nights, I would abate the sternness of my style, mongst these stern sounds to mingle soft delights, and tell how Arlo through Diana's spites, being of old the best and fairest hill that was in all this holy highland's heights, was made the most unpleasant and most ill. Meanwhile, O Clio, lend Calliope thy quill. Whilome when Ireland flourished in fame of wealths and goodness, far above the rest of all that bear the British Islands name, the gods then used for pleasure and for rest oft to resort thereto, when seemed them best. But none of all therein more pleasure found than Cynthia, that is sovereign queen professed of woods and forests, which therein abound, sprinkled with wholesome waters more than most on ground. But mongst them all, as fittest for her game, either for chase of beasts with hound or bow, or for to shroud in shade from Phoebus' flame, or bathe in fountains that do freshly flow, or from high hills, or from the dales below, she chose this Arlo, where she did resort with all her nymphs enranged on a row, with whom the woody gods did oft consort. For with the nymphs the satyrs loved to play and sport. Amongst the which there was a nymph that hight Molana, daughter of old Father Mole, and sister unto Mulla, fair and bright, unto whose bed false Bregog whilome stole, that shepherd Colin dearly did condole, and made her luckless loves well known to be. But this Molana, were she not so shoal, were no less fair and beautiful than she, yet as she is, a fairer flood may no man see. For first she springs out of two marble rocks, on which a grove of oaks high mounted grows, that as a girland seems to deck the locks of some fair bride, brought forth with pompous shows out of her bower, that many flowers strows. So through the flowery dales she tumbling down, through many woods and shady coverts flows, that on each side her silver channel crown, till to the plain she come, whose valleys she doth drown. In her sweet streams Diana used oft, after her sweaty chase and toilsome play, to bathe herself, and after on the soft and downy grass her dainty limbs to lay in covert shade, where none behold her may. For much she hated sight of living eye. Foolish god Faunus, though full many a day he saw her clad, yet longed foolishly to see her naked mongst her nymphs in privity. No way he found to compass his desire, but to corrupt Molana, this her maid, her to discover for some secret hire. So her with flattering words he first assayed, and after pleasing gifts for her purveyed, queen apples and red cherries from the tree, with which he her allured and betrayed, to tell what time he might her lady see, when she herself did bathe, that he might secret be. Thereto he promised, if she would him pleasure, with this small boon, to quit her with a better. To weet, that whereas she had out of measure long loved the fanchion, who by naught did set her, that he would undertake for this to get her to be his love, and of him liked well. Besides all which, he vowed to be her debtor for many mo good turns than he would tell, the least of which this little pleasure should excel. The simple maid did yield to him anon, and eft him placed where he close might view, that never any saw, save only one, who for his hire to so foolhardy due, was of his hounds devoured in hunter's hue. Though, as her manner was on sunny day, Diana with her nymphs about her drew to this sweet spring, where doffing her array, she bathed her lovely limbs for Jove a likely prey. There Faunus saw that pleased much his eye, and made his heart to tickle in his breast, that for great joy of somewhat he did spy, he could him not contain in silent rest, but breaking forth in laughter, loud professed his foolish thought. O foolish fawn indeed, that couldst not hold thyself so hidden blest, but wouldest needs thine own conceit areed, babblers unworthy been of so divine a meed. The goddess, all abashed with that noise, in haste forth started from the guilty brook, and running straight whereas she heard his voice, enclosed the bush about, and there him took like darred lark, not daring up to look on her, whose sight before so much he sought. Thenceforth they drew him by the horns, and shook nigh all to pieces, that they left him not. And then into the open light they forth him brought, like as an hussif, that with busy care thinks of her dairy to make wondrous gain, finding whereas some wicked beast unware, that breaks into her dare house, there doth drain her creaming pans, and frustrate all her pain, hath in some snare or gin set close behind entrapped him, and caught into her train, then thinks what punishment were best assigned, and thousand deaths deviseth in her vengeful mind. So did Diana and her maidens all use silly Faunus, now within their bale. They mock and scorn him, and him foul miscall. Some by the nose him plucked, some by the tail, and by his goatish beard some did him hail. Yet he, poor soul, with patience all did bear, for naught against their wills might countervail, ne aught he said, whatever he did hear, but hanging down his head did like a mome appear. At length, when they had flouted him their fill, they gan to cast what penance him to give. Some would have gelt him, but that same would spill the wood god's breed, which must for ever live. Others would through the river him have drive, and duck it deep, but that seemed penance light. But most agreed, and did this sentence give, him in deer's skin to clad, and in that plight to hunt him with their hounds, himself save how he might. But Cynthia's self, more angry than the rest, thought not enough to punish him in sport, and of her shame to make a gamesome jest, but gan examine him in straighter sort, which of her nymphs or other close consort him thither brought, and her to him betrayed. He, much afeared, to her confessed short, that 'twas Molana which her so bewrayed. Then all at once her hands upon Molana laid. But him, according as they had decreed, with a deer's skin they covered, and then chased with all their hounds, that after him did speed. But he, more speedy, from them fled more fast than any deer, so sore him dread aghast. They after followed all with shrill outcry, shouting as they the heavens would have brast, that all the woods and dales where he did fly did bring again, and loud re-echo to the sky. So they him followed till they weary were, when, back returning to Molan again, they by commandment of Diana there her whelmed with stones. Yet Faunus, for her pain, of her beloved Fanchon did obtain that her he would receive unto his bed. So now her waves pass through a pleasant plain, till with the Fanchon she herself do wed, and, both combined, themselves in one fair river spread. Natheless Diana, full of indignation, thenceforth abandoned her delicious brook, in whose sweet stream before that bad occasion so much delight to bathe her limb she took. Nay, only her, but also quite forsook all those fair forests about Arlo hid, and all that mountain which doth overlook the richest champaign that may else be rid, and the fair shore in which are thousand salmons bred. Them all, and all that she so dear did weigh, thenceforth she left, and parting from the place, thereon an heavy hapless curse did lay, to weet, that wolves, where she was wont to space, should harbored be, and all those woods deface, and thieves should rob and spoil that coast around, since which those woods and all that goodly chase doth to this day with wolves and thieves abound, which too true that land's indwellers since have found.
End of Canto 6. Recording by Thomas Copeland. Book 7, Canto 7 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund SPENSER. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Thomas Copeland.
Canto 7. Pealing from Jove to nature's bar, bold alteration pleads large evidence, but nature soon her righteous doom areeds. Ah, whither dost thou now, thou greater muse, me from these woods and pleasing forests bring? And my frail spirit, that doth oft refuse this too high flight, unfit for her weak wing, lift up aloft to tell of heaven's King, thy sovereign sire, his fortunate success, and victory in bigger notes to sing, which he obtained against that Titaness, that him of heaven's empire sought to dispossess. Yet sith I needs must follow thy behest, do thou my weaker wit with skill inspire, fit for this turn, and in my feeble breast kindle fresh sparks of that immortal fire which learned minds inflameth with desire of heavenly things. For who but thou alone, that art y born of heaven and heavenly sire, can tell things done in heaven so long agone, so far past memory of man that may be known? Now at the time that was before agreed, the gods assembled all on Arlo hill, as well those that are sprung of heavenly seed, as those that all the other world do fill, and rule both sea and land unto their will. Only the infernal powers might not appear, as well for horror of their countenance ill, as for the unruly fiends which they did fear, yet Pluto and Proserpina were present there. And thither also came all other creatures, whatever life or motion do retain, according to their sundry kinds of features, that Arlo scarcely could them all contain, so full they filled every hill and plain. And had not nature's sergeant, that is order, them well disposed by his busy pain, and ranged far abroad in every border, they would have caused much confusion and disorder. Then forth issued great goddess, great Dame Nature, with goodly port and gracious majesty, being far greater and more tall of stature than any of the gods or powers on high. Yet certes by her face and physiognomy, whether she man or woman inly were, that could not any creature well descry, for with a veil that wimpled everywhere her head and face was hid, that mote to none appear. That, some do say, was so by skill devised, to hide the terror of her uncouth hue from mortal eyes, that should be sore agrised. For that her face did like a lion's shew, that eye of white could not endure to view. But others tell that it so beauteous was, and round about such beams of splendor threw, that it the sun 1,000 times did pass, ne could be seen but like an image in a glass. That well may seem untrue, for well I ween, that this same day when she on Arlo sat, her garment was so bright and wondrous sheen, that my frail wit cannot devise to what it to compare, nor find like stuff to that. as those three sacred saints, though else most wise, yet on Mount Thabor quite their wits forgat, when they their glorious Lord in strange disguise transfigured saw. His garments so did daze their eyes. In a fair plain upon an equal hill she placed was in a pavilion, not such as craftsmen by their idle skill are wont for princes' states to fashion, but th' earth herself, of her own motion, out of her fruitful bosom made to grow most dainty trees, that shooting up anon did seem to bow their blossoming heads full low, for homage unto her, and like a throne did show. So hard it is for any living wight all her array and vestments to tell, that old Dan Geoffrey, in whose gentle sprite the pure wellhead of poesy did dwell, in his fowl's parley durst not with it mell, but it transferred to Allen, who he thought had in his plaintive kind described it well, which who will read set forth so as it ought, go seek ye out that Allen where he may be sought. And all the earth far underneath her feet was dight with flowers that voluntary grew out of the ground, and sent forth odors sweet, 10,000 mores of sundry scent and hue, that might delight the smell or please the view, the which the nymphs from all the brooks thereby had gathered, which they at her footstool threw, that richer seemed than any tapestry that princes' bowers adorn with painted imagery. The mole himself, to honor her the more, did deck himself in freshest fair attire, and his high head that seemeth always hoar with hardened frosts of former winter's ire, he with an oaken girland now did tire, as if the love of some new nymph late seen had in him kindled youthful fresh desire, and made him change his gray attire to green. Ah, gentle mole, such joyance hath thee well beseen. Was never so great joyance since the day that all the gods whilome assembled were on Hemus hill in their divine array, to celebrate the solemn bridal cheer twixt Peleus and Dame Thetis pointed there, where Phoebus' self, that god of poets' height, they say did sing the spousal hymn full clear, that all the gods were ravished with delight of his celestial song and music's wondrous might. This great grandmother of all creatures bred, great nature, ever young yet full of eld, still moving yet unmoved from her stead, unseen of any yet of all beheld, thus sitting on her throne, as I have telled, before her came Dame Mutability, and being low before her presence felled, with meek obeisance and humility, thus gan her plaintive plea with words to amplify. To thee, O greatest goddess, only great, an humble suppliant, lo, I lowly fly, seeking for right, which I of thee entreat, who right to all dost deal indifferently, damning all wrong and tortious injury, which any of thy creatures do to other, oppressing them with power unequally, sith of them all thou art the equal mother, and knittest each to each as brother unto brother. To thee, therefore, of this same Jove I plain, and of his fellow gods that feign to be, that challenge to themselves the whole world's reign, of which the greatest part is due to me, and heaven itself by heritage in fee. For heaven and earth I both alike do deem, sith heaven and earth are both alike to thee, and gods no more than men thou dost esteem, for even the gods to thee as men to gods do seem. Then weigh, O sovereign goddess, by what right these gods do claim the world's whole sovereignty, and that is only due unto thy might arrogate to themselves ambitiously. As for the gods' own principality, which Jove usurps unjustly, that to be my heritage Jove's self cannot deny, from my great grandsire Titan unto me derived by due descent, as is well known to thee. Yet maugre Jove and all his gods beside, I do possess the world's most regiment, as if ye please it into parts divide, and every part's inholders to convent, shall to your eyes appear incontinent. And first the earth, great mother of us all, that only seems unmoved and permanent, and unto mutability not thrall, yet is she changed in part, and eke in general. For all that from her springs and is ybred, however fair it flourish for a time, yet see we soon decay, and being dead, to turn again unto their earthly slime. Yet out of their decay and mortal crime we daily see new creatures to arise, and of their winter spring another prime, unlike in form, and changed by strange disguise. So turn they still about, and change in restless wise. As for her tenants, that is, man and beasts, the beasts we daily see massacred die, as thralls and vassals unto men's behests. And men themselves do change continually, from youth to eld, from wealth to poverty, from good to bad, from bad to worst of all. Ne do their bodies only flit and fly, but eke their minds, which they immortal call, still change and vary thoughts, as new occasions fall. Ne is the water in more constant case, whether those same on high, or these below. For th' ocean moveth still from place to place, and every river still doth ebb and flow. Ne any lake that seems most still and slow, ne pool so small that can his smoothness hold, when any wind doth under heaven blow, with which the clouds are also tossed and rolled, now like great hills, and straight like sluices them unfold. So likewise are all watery living wights, still tossed and turned with continual change, never abiding in their steadfast plights. The fish, still floating, do at random range, and never rest, but evermore exchange their dwelling places, as the streams them carry. Ne have the watery fowls a certain grange wherein to rest, ne in one stead do tarry, but flitting still do fly, and still their places vary. Next is the air, which who feels not by sense, for of all sense it is the middle mean, to flit still, and with subtle influence of his thin spirit, all creatures to maintain in state of life. O weak life, that does lean on things so tickle as than steady air, which every hour is changed and altered clean with every blast that bloweth foul or fair. The fair doth it prolong, the foul doth it impair. Therein the changes infinite behold, which to her creatures every minute chance. Now boiling hot, straight freezing deadly cold, now fair sunshine that makes all skip and dance, straight bitter storms and baleful countenance, that makes them all to shiver and to shake. Rain, hail, and snow do pay them sad penance, and dreadful thunderclaps that make them quake, with flames and flashing lights that thousand changes make. Last is the fire, which, though it live for ever, ne can be quenched quite, yet every day we see his parts, so soon as they do sever, to lose their heat, and shortly to decay. So makes himself his own consuming prey. Ne any living creatures doth he breed, but all that are of others bred doth slay, and with their death his cruel life doth feed, naught leaving but their barren ashes without seed. Thus all these four, the which the groundwork be of all the world, and of all living wights, to thousand sorts of change we subject see. Yet are they changed by other wondrous sleights into themselves, and lose their native mights, the fire to air, and the air to water sheer, and water into earth. Yet water fights with fire, and air with earth approaching near. Yet all are in one body, and as one appear. So in them all reigns mutability. However these that gods themselves do call, of them do claim the rule and sovereignty, as Vesta of the fire ethereal, Vulcan of this, with us so usual, Ops of the earth, and Juno of the air, Neptune of seas, and nymphs of rivers all, for all those rivers to me subject are, and all the rest which they usurp be all my share. Which to approve and true, as I have told, vouchsafe, O goddess, to thy presence call the rest, which do the world in being hold, as times and seasons of the year that fall, of all the which demand in general, or judge thyself by verdict of thine eye, whether to me they are not subject all. Nature did yield thereto, and by bade order, call them all before her majesty. So forth issued the seasons of the year. First lusty spring, all dight in leaves of flowers, that freshly budded, and new blooms did bear, in which 1,000 birds had built their bowers, that sweetly sung to call forth paramours. And in his hand a javelin he did bear, and on his head, as fit for warlike stowers, a gilt and graven morion he did wear, that as some did him love, so others did him fear. Then came the jolly summer, being dight in a thin silken cassock colored green, that was unlined all, to be more light, and on his head a girland well beseen he wore, from which, as he had choffed been, the sweat did drop, and in his hand he bore a bow and shafts, as he in forest green had hunted late the libbard or the boar, and now would bathe his limbs with labor heated sore. Then came the autumn, all in yellow clad, as though he joyed in his plenteous store, laden with fruits that made him laugh full glad that he had banished hunger, which tofore had by the belly oft him pinched sore. Upon his head a wreath that was enrolled with ears of corn of every sort he bore, and in his hand a sickle he did hold, to reap the ripened fruits, the which the earth had yoled. Lastly came winter, clothed all in frieze, chattering his teeth for cold that did him chill, whilst on his hoary beard his breath did freeze, and the dull drops that from his purple bill, as from a limbeck, did adown distil. In his right hand a tipped staff he held, with which his feeble steps he stayed still, for he was faint with cold, and weak with eld, that scarce his lucid limbs he able was to weld. These marching softly thus in order went, and after them the months all riding came, first sturdy March, with brows full sternly bent, and armed strongly rode upon a ram, the same which over Hellespontus swam, yet in his hand a spade he also hent, and in a bag all sorts of seeds disam, which on the earth he strowed as he went, and filled her womb with fruitful hope of nourishment. Next came fresh April, full of lusty head, and wanton as a kid whose horn new buds. Upon a bull he rode, the same which led Europa floating through the Argolic floods. His horns were gilden all with golden studs, and garnished with garlands goodly dight of all the fairest flowers and freshest buds, which the earth brings forth, and wet he seemed in sight with waves, through which he waded for his love's delight. Then came fair May, the fairest maid on ground, decked all with dainties of her season's pride, and throwing flowers out of her lap around. Upon 2 brethren's shoulders she did ride, the twins of Leda, which on either side supported her, like to their sovereign queen. Lord, how all creatures laughed when her they spied, and leaped and danced as they had ravished been, and Cupid's self about her fluttered all in green. And after her came jolly June, arrayed all in green leaves, as he a player were, yet in his time he wrought as well as played, that by his plough irons mote right well appear. Upon a crab he rode, that him did bear with crooked clawing steps and uncouth pace, and backward yode, as bargemen wont to fare, bending their force contrary to their face, like that ungracious crew which feigns demurest grace. Then came hot July, boiling like to fire, that all his garments he had cast away. Upon a lion raging, yet with ire, he boldly rode, and made him to obey. It was the beast that whilom did foray the Nemean forest, till them Phitrionide him slew, and with his hide did him array. Behind his back a scythe, and by his side, under his belt, he bore a sickle circling wide. The 6th was August, being rich arrayed in garment all of gold down to the ground, yet rode he not, but led a lovely maid forth by the lily hand, the which was crowned with ears of corn, and full her hand was found. That was the righteous virgin which of old lived here on earth, and plenty made abound. But after wrong was loved, and justice sold, she left th' unrighteous world, and was to heaven extolled. Next him September marched eke on foot, yet was he heavy laden with the spoil of harvest's riches, which he made his boot, and him enriched with bounty of the soil. In his one hand, as fit for harvest's toil, he held a knife hook, and in th'other hand a pair of weights, with which he did assoil both more and less, where it in doubt did stand, and equal gave to each, as justice duly scanned. Then came October, full of merry glee, for yet his knoll was totty of the must, which he was treading in the wine-fat sea, and of the joyous oil, whose gentle gust made him so frolic and so full of lust. Upon a dreadful scorpion he did ride, the same which by Diana's doom unjust slew great Orion, and eke by his side he had his ploughing share and coulter ready tied. Next was November, he full gross and fat, as fed with lard, and that right well might seem, for he had been a fatting hogs of late, that yet his brows with sweat did reek and steam, and yet the season was full sharp and green. In planting eke he took no small delight, whereon he rode not easy was to deem, for it a dreadful centaur was in sight, the seed of Saturn and Ferneus, Chiron hight. And after him came next the chill December, yet he, through merry feasting which he made, and great bonfires, did not the cold remember. His Saviour's birth his mind so much did glad, upon a shaggy bearded goat he rade, the same wherewith Dan Jove in tender years they say was nourished by the Idaean maid, and in his hand a broad deep bowl he bears, of which he freely drinks in health to all his peers. Then came old January, rapid well in many weeds to keep the cold away, yet did he quake and quiver like to quell, and blow his nails to warm them if he may, for they were numbed with holding all the day an hatchet keen, with which he felled wood, and from the trees did lop the needless spray. Upon an huge great earth pot steen he stood, from whose wide mouth there flowed forth the Roman flood. And lastly came cold February, sitting in an old wagon, for he could not ride, drawn of two fishes for the season fitting, which through the flood before did softly slide and swim away. Yet had he by his side his plough and harness fit to till the ground, and tools to prune the trees, before the pride of hasting prime did make them burgeon round. So passed the 12 months forth, and their due places found. And after these there came the day and night, riding together both with equal pace, one on a palfrey black, the other white. But night had covered her uncomely face with a black veil, and held in hand a mace, on top whereof the moon and stars were pight, and sleep and darkness round about did trace. But day did bear upon his sceptre's height the goodly sun, encompassed all with beames bright. Then came the hours, fair daughters of high Jove and timely night, the which were all endued with wondrous beauty, fit to kindle love. But they were virgins all, and love eschewed, that might forslack the charge to them foreshewed by mighty Jove, who did them porters make of heaven's gate, whence all the gods issued, which they did daily watch, and nightly wake, by even turns, ne ever did their charge forsake. And after all came life, and lastly death, death with most grim and grisly visage seen, yet is he not but parting of the breath, ne ought to see, but like a shade to ween, unbodied, unsouled, unheard, unseen. But life was like a fair young lusty boy, such as they feigned and Cupid to have been, full of delightful health and lively joy, decked all with flowers, and wings of gold fit to employ. When these were past, thus gan the Titaness: Lo, mighty mother, now be-judge, and say whether in all thy creatures more or less change doth not reign, and bear the greatest sway. For who sees not that time on all doth prey? But times do change and move continually, So nothing here long standeth in one stay. Wherefore this lower world who can deny, but to be subject still to mutability? Then thus 'gan Jove: right true it is, that these and all things else that under heaven dwell are changed of time, who doth them all disseize of being. But who is it, to me tell, that time himself doth move, and still compel to keep his course? Is not that namely we, which pour that virtue from our heavenly cell that moves them all, and makes them changed be? So them we gods do rule, and in them also thee. To whom thus mutability: the things which we see not, how they are moved and swayed, ye may attribute to yourselves as kings, and say they by your secret power are made. But what we see not, who shall us persuade? But were they so, as ye them feign to be, moved by your might, and ordered by your aid, yet what if I can prove that even ye yourselves are likewise changed and subject unto me? And first, concerning her that is the first, even you, fair Cynthia, whom ye so much make Jove's dearest darling, she was bred and nursed on Cynthus hill, whence she her name did take. Then is she mortal born, howso ye crake. Besides, her face and countenance every day we changed see, and sundry forms partake, now horned, now round, now bright, now brown and gray, so that as changeful as the moon, men used to say. Next Mercury, who though he less appear to change his hue, and always seem as one, yet he his course doth alter every year, and is of late far out of order gone. So Venus eke, that goodly paragon, though fair all night, yet is she dark all day. And Phoebus' self, who lightsome is alone, yet is he oft eclipsed by the way, and fills the darkened world with terror and dismay. Now Mars, that valiant man, is changed most, for he sometimes so far runs out of square, that he his way doth seem quite to have lost, and clean without his usual sphere to fare, that even these star gazers stonished are at sight thereof, and damn their lying books. So likewise grim Sir Saturn oft doth spare his stern aspect, and calm his crabbed looks. So many turning cranks these have, so many crooks. But you, Dan Jove, that only constant are, and king of all the rest, as ye do claim, are you not subject eke to this Miss Fair? Then let me ask you this withouten blame: where were ye born? Some say in Crete by name, others in Thebes, and others otherwhere. But wheresoever they comment the same, they all consent that ye begotten were, and born here in this world, ne other can appear. Then are ye mortal born, and thrall to me, unless the kingdom of the sky ye make immortal and unchangeable to be. Besides, that power and virtue which ye spake, that ye here work, doth many changes take, and your own natures change. For each of you that virtue have, or this or that to make, is checked and changed from his nature true, by others' opposition or obliquid view. Besides, the sundry motions of your spheres, so sundry ways and fashions as clerks feign, some in short space, and some in longer years. What is the same but alteration plain? Only the starry sky doth still remain. Yet do the stars and signs therein still move, and even itself is moved, as wizards sayn. But all that moveth doth mutation love. Therefore both you and them to me I subject prove. Then, since within this wide great universe nothing doth firm and permanent appear, but all things tossed and turned by transverse, what then should let but I aloft should rear my trophy, and from all the triumph bear? Now judge then, O thou greatest goddess true, according as thyself dost see and hear, and unto me a doom that is my due, that is the rule of all being ruled by you. So having ended, silence long ensued, ne nature to or fro spake for a space. But with firm eyes affixed, the ground still view it. Meanwhile, all creatures looking in her face, expecting th' end of this so doubtful case, did hang in long suspense what would ensue, to whether side should fall the sovereign place. At length she, looking up with cheerful view, the silence brake,
and gave her doom in speeches few.
I well consider all that ye have said, and find that all things steadfastness do hate, and changed be. Yet being rightly weighed, they are not changed from their first estate, but by their change their being do dilate, and turning to themselves at length again, do work their own perfection so by fate. Then over them change doth not rule and reign, but they reign over change, and do their states maintain. Cease therefore, daughter, further to aspire, and ye content thus to be ruled by me. For thy decay thou seek'st by this desire, but time shall come that all shall changed be, and from thenceforth none no more change shall see. So was the Titaness put down and whist, and Jove confirmed in his imperial see. Then was that whole assembly quite dismissed, and nature's self did vanish, whither no man wist. The 8th Canto, Unperfect. When I bethink me on that speech while air of mutability, and well it way, meseems that though she all unworthy were of the heavens' rule, yet, very sooth to say, in all things else she bears the greatest sway, which makes me loathe this state of life so tickle, and love of things so vain to cast away, whose flowering pride, so fading and so fickle, short time shall soon cut down with his consuming sickle. Then gin I think on that which nature said, of that same time when no more change shall be, but steadfast rest of all things firmly stayed upon the pillars of eternity, that is contraire to mutability. For all that moveth doth in change delight, but thenceforth all shall rest eternally with him that is the God of Sabbath height. O thou great Sabbath God, grant me that Sabbath sight.
End of Canto 7. Recording by Thomas Copeland. End of Book 7 of the Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. End of the Faerie Queene.